Good evening and welcome everyone to Eastbourne Borough Council full council meeting. I'm the Mayor, Councillor Steve Wallace. This meeting is being held remotely and broadcast live, and members should follow the etiquette guide by two remote meetings. In particular, please make sure that all mobile phones are off. For those watching on live stream, please bear with us as we may experience some technical difficulties. All councillors have been sent the agenda papers for this meeting. As usual, would any councillor wishing to speak please indicate by raising a hand electronically. If you do not have the electronic hand function or are joining the meeting by phone only and you wish to speak, you will need to say your name so that can be so you can get given an opportunity to come in. Speeches are limited to 5 minutes. However, as this is the budget debate, Councillor Holt, you can speak to up to 20, and whatever you speak can be mirrored by Councillor Smart. 20 minutes is not an instruction, it's just an option. Please unmute your microphone when you are called to speak and turn it back on when you have finished. If you have any connection issues, you may wish to turn off your camera. If you fully lose connection or are unable to join via Teams straight away, please join the meeting by phone. Okay. So agenda items 1, 2 and 3 will be taken together. Introductions, apologies for absence and declarations of interests. Mr. Russell, have we received any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Simon Russell, Head of Democratic Services, and I received no apologies for absence at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. I'm now going to call a register. When I call your name, please introduce yourself and please let me know if you have any declarations of interests. Starting from the top, Councillor Ansell. You're on mute, Councillor Ansell.
Good evening. I am Councillor Caroline Ansell and I have no declarations of interest to make in respect of the items on the agenda this evening. Thank
you. Councillor Bannister.
Hi, I'm Councillor Margaret Bannister and I have no declarations to make.
Councillor Burton.
I'm Councillor Helen Burton and I've got a declaration of interest to make on item 11.
Okay, can you give the details please?
It's a pecuniary interest, I believe, because the charity I run received a closed business grant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chowdhury.
No declaration.
Thank you. Councillor DeCara.
I'm Councillor Penny DeCara and I've no declarations of interest to make in respect of the items on the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Diplock.
Good evening everyone. Councillor Peter Diplock from Old Town. I have no interest to declare to this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Freebody.
Evening all. It's Councillor Tony Freebody. I have no declarations to make on any items on the agenda.
Councillor Holt.
Good evening, everybody. It's Councillor Holt. Mr. Mayor, I've spoken to Oliver Dixon and I feel it's worth, although none of them are pecuniary, to just declare interest in item number 8A, the council budget, because I'm employed by your Eastbourne bid and any sort of future grants or support for recovery the bid may apply for. I'm also declaring a an interest on item number 9A because my organisation has written with regards to the Brighton and Hove temporary accommodation placements. And just to keep going, I'm also declaring an interest on item 11 as my organisation has been supporting businesses to claim the grant, but we haven't received any funding to do so. But we feel that for reasons of transparency, it's best that I raise those 3 items tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. Councillor Lamb.
Good evening, Councillor Lamb, Meads Ward. I have no interest to declare in respect of any of the items on the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Maxted.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Councillor Robin Maxted. I have no interests to declare. Thank you.
Councillor Metcalfe.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening all. Councillor Paul Metcalfe, Sovereign Ward, and I have nothing to declare of interest in respect of any items on the agenda this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Mia.
Good evening, everyone, and Mr. Mayor. I am a councillor for Langley Ward, and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Good evening. I'm Amanda Morris, old councillor in Old Town, and I have nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch.
Good evening, Councillor Colin Murdoch, and I have no declaration of interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Good evening, Councillor Jim Murray from Hampden Park. Nothing to declare for this evening's meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Rotherham.
Councillor Pat Rotherham, I represent Offerton and I have nothing to declare for this evening's meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Shuttleworth.
Good evening, Councillor Alan Shuttleworth for the Langley Ward, and I would like to declare an interest on item 11. I am a chair of the charity trustees for Langley Community Library, who receive support from the grants. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Good evening. Councillor Robert Smart, Meads Ward, opposition group leader, and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Swansborough.
Colin Swansborough, Hampden Park, nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Barry Taylor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Councillor for Meads, and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Tutt.
Good evening. My name is David Tutt. I'm councillor for St Anthony's Ward and leader of the council. I have no interest to declare on items that are being discussed in the agenda this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Vaughan.
Good evening. My name's Councillor Candy Vaughan of Langley Ward, and I have no interest to declare for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whippy.
Good evening. My name's Councillor Whippy of St Anthony's Ward, and I have no declarations. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm Councillor Steve Wallace, and I'd like to declare an interest. It's a personal interest in agenda item number 9, as I work for a charity, or I'm a volunteer for a charity called Warming Up the Homeless. But I've already spoken to the officers. There's no prejudicial interest there, but I just want to make it public. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
I didn't you called me, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Belsey, I do apologise. Look at that, I must have gone from straight from Bannister to Burton. Councillor Belsey, how can I miss you? I do apologise.
Or me, Steve, Councillor Dow.
Oh, okay.
Well, perhaps they don't want us here.
Yeah, we do. Councillor Belsey.
Councillor Colin Belsey, Ratton Ward, nothing to declare. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jonathan Dow, Old Town Ward Councillor, and nothing to declare.
Thank you very much. Okay, back to the agenda. Public right to address. We have 4 members of the public who wish to speak on the motion number 9, and they will be read up by Sarah Launch, and they are from Christina Eubank from the Chamber, Luke Johnson from your Eastbourne, Chris Hayter from the Hospitality Association, and Heidi Lane from the Crown Anchor. They will be read out during the motion debate. Mr. Russell, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe we've missed item 4, which was the minutes of the last meeting, so I just wanted to draw attention to that.
I'm just coming to that right now. Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting held on the 18th of November 2020. Can we agree that they were agree that the minutes were correct?
Agreed.
Mr. Mayor, on page 7 of the minutes.
Yep.
It says I mentioned that Colette Cullen had died, and you've got the wrong husband in here. It was Dennis Cullen, not Derek Cullen.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Belsey. We'll get that amended. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
The Mayor's announcements are agenda item number 6. No real announcements there. I'd just like to say at this point, since we last met, Dean Savory has stepped down as the councillor, and we thank Dean for his work in his ward and for the borough, and we wish him well in his new adventures. And I think Councillor Tutt, you wanted to say a few words. Councillor Tutt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Dean joined the council back in 2015, and when he did, he was the youngest councillor at the age of 21. During his time on the council, he served on several committees, chairing some of those, and also as a member of cabinet. He represented variously the residents of St Anthony's and of Hampden Park, and dealt with a large amount of casework. At the time he was elected, he was working for Stephen Lloyd, who was then Member of Parliament. And when Stephen lost the general election in 2019, it meant that Dean had to find alternative employment. Regrettably, the result of that alternative employment means that his new employer requires him to be politically neutral, hence his need to resign his position on Eastbourne Borough Council. As you say, we wish him well in the future, and we hope that we can recruit more young councillors, because we do need to maintain the diversity that exists across the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tutt. Okay, public right of address, I've gone through that, sorry. Mayor's announcements. Okay, order of business as per the agenda. So we now go on to agenda item 8, which is account for budget and setting of the council tax. Councillor Holt, do you want to move the recommendations, please?
Yes, please. Councillor Steve Holt, finance portfolio holder. I would like to recommend the recommendations, or move the recommendations.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder, please?
Please, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd like to second and reserve my right to speak later in the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Smart, for the opposition group, do you have any amendments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I do have an amendment, and it has been circulated, I believe.
Thank you. And who is seconding your amendment, please?
Councillor Di Cara.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Holt, please present your budget. As I said, you've got up to 20 minutes to speak, and once you've spoken, Councillor Smart will have the same amount of time, and then we open it for a general debate. Councillor Holt, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and for the first time, those watching at home on YouTube, thank you for joining us. This budget speech will cover the impact of coronavirus on this authority. Firstly, and most importantly, I wanted to take the opportunity on behalf of this authority to pass on our condolences to anyone who has lost a loved one to coronavirus. Mr. Mayor, I wish to also place on record my thanks to the Chief Finance Officer, Humira Javadi, her deputies Ola Olawabi and Andrew Clark, and the finance team for their work in helping me put together this budget and their time in working with our government partners. I'm profoundly grateful for their support and their dedicated work to our town during this very difficult time. Mr. Mayor, in his letter to local authorities, the Secretary of State for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government stated that the local government workers were the unsung heroes of the pandemic. I wholeheartedly agree. I'm deeply proud of this authority for what it has done to respond so positively to the appalling impacts of the coronavirus. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to remind everyone of just some of these. Annie Wills and our tourism team utilised their skills and buildings to transform them into community hubs. Working around the clock, the team packed hundreds of kilos of pasta, rice and essential items to ensure the most vulnerable continue to have a food supply when so many supermarket shelves seemingly ran empty. Jack Brownell, Chris Jordan and our theatre booking team helped staff the COVID helpline, providing support, advice, assistance and listening ear to those who needed it. Even now, working with our MP and the NHS, our tourism team have transformed our conference facilities and leisure centres into vaccination hubs. I was truly inspired by my meeting with the events team and NHS just 2 weeks ago as they vaccinated the 20,000th resident. Julie Hickling and our Neighbourhood First team worked with our local food bank and ensured that food and supplies were delivered. Nick Jugatel and our business rates team put together from scratch an innovative new grant portal, now recognised as an exemplar by the government. This has ensured payments of now the 12th grant is paid within just 3 days, all the while satisfying the government that fraudulent cases are prevented. Sean Towie and our waste team worked throughout the pandemic, ensuring no collection was missed, putting their own health at risk. Rebecca Jackson and our Russ Leap Initiative worked with the housing teams to find accommodation for our homeless community. In short, our wonderful staff worked all hours into all necessary areas of the authority. They were retrained, redeployed and rehomed, all headed to the front line when asked. I am proud of every single one of them, and I am sure this is shared by us all. We've also worked across our entire community. We chaired partnership meetings with 3BA, the MP, Chamber, Hospitality Association, BID, charities, Public Health England and the police to ensure that where there were problems, we worked together to solve them. My thanks to all of them for continued support. We are stronger together. Utilising the skills, knowledge and experience so many have in Eastbourne, and by working together, we were able to launch COVID Ready, the first ever quality standard for combating COVID across the business sectors. Our environmental health team liaised closely with the business community to ensure that risk assessments were approved, adopted and implemented. All to give assurances to our visitors and businesses that Eastbourne was and always will be a safe place to come. Mr. Mayor, in short, as ever, this authority adapted magnificently to identify the needs of the community and to address them fast. All this during the worst crisis we have ever faced as a nation since the Second World War. I'd like to put on record my gratitude for everyone's efforts from all sides. We rallied around in the way Eastbourne does so well. It is an honour for all of us to serve on this council and serve our town. The Secretary of State went on to say in his letter that it was his role to make sure you have everything you need to carry out this vital work. We are grateful for the measures that the government has taken to help mitigate the costs of COVID to local authorities. Yet, Mr. Mayor, we have received £1.8 million in grant funding, and it should be pointed out that our net costs as a result of COVID have amounted to £3.7 million. The government's latest support is to allow us to capitalise, and we're not alone in receiving this support. I am grateful to our MP for lobbying the Secretary of State on our behalf. We are joined by other authorities, led by both Conservative and Labour administration. 4 have received support, and I am certain others will follow. This is a reflection on the exceptional financial circumstances we and others find ourselves. However, Mr. Mayor, residents can rest assured we have had more scrutiny on our financial affairs than ever before, with regular councillor briefings, submissions to the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, an independent review by the LGA, and a stringent review by the independent assessor of SIPFA. And I have welcomed this scrutiny. In 2 other authorities, the government have appointed advisors to ensure they are meeting financial and governance commitments. This has not happened here, and this shows the trust the national government have in our plans and our ability to deliver. I look forward to working closely with SIPFA over the coming months as we stabilise the financial challenges brought upon us by the devastating impact of COVID. Mr. Mayor, we identified the need for this support early, which is why we approached the government back in the summer when asked. And Mr. Mayor, members may not be aware, but this capitalisation direction is not actually new. Peterborough, a Conservative council, was given relief of £5.6 million in 2019 and 2020 as a result of the operational and financial consequences of the COVID-19 outbreak. They are today receiving continued capitalisation support. Mr. Mayor, our authority demonstrated to government that this year, despite making £4.8 million in savings and efficiencies, we face the extraordinary loss of 60% of our income overnight from areas such as £6 million in theatre ticket revenue. This would be unsustainable for any council. For those at home, local government finance can sound confusing. Whilst I don't claim to be an accountant, even I have found myself beginning to talk in code. I say things like Section 114. We talk about the Section 151 officer. We speak in acronyms discussing the NNDR, NHB, BRR, RSG, HRA, MTFS, IFRS and ISA 260. We confirm what our prudential financial indicators are, what multipliers to use and how it may affect our baseline need. Essentially though, the maths is simple. Since 2019, Eastbourne Borough Council has 4 main income streams: council tax, business rates, locally raised revenue and investments. Mr. Mayor, tonight I ask everyone at home to consider, if I took away over 60% of their income tomorrow morning, what would they do? I'm sure most would either look to cut their costs or take a loan, and that is exactly what we have done. And for what it's worth, Mr. Mayor, with the cost of COVID to the national government expected to be £394 billion, the government is also having to take out loans, consider its spending plans, and I am sure make cuts. Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased that the initial reports in the press calling this a bailout has since been corrected. This is not a bailout. It is a loan amounting to up to £12.8 million and will be repaid by us, Eastbourne Borough Council. Mr. Mayor, I will resist the temptation to criticise the government for their decision to provide us with a loan instead of a grant. I'll leave it for members and our residents to decide if this approach is consistent with the doing what it takes commitment. However, I would be remiss in my duties as financial portfolio holder if I did not express now to you all my concerns that the loan terms, in particular the 1% interest rate above that of the Public Works Loan Board, places yet further strain on our finances and inevitably Eastbourne residents. I do question really if it offers best value for money for both sides. Mr. Mayor, we have a strong record in our financial management affairs. We have delivered year-on-year savings and responded exceptionally well to 10 years of funding cuts and austere government policies. Allow me to recite a short but poignant statement from the independent assessor's report to MHCLG. The council has done well to deliver 78% of the savings in the circumstances. Mr. Mayor, 60% of our services are paid for by the income that we generate from our services. This, together with over £20 million of cumulative savings since 2010, have enabled us to continue to deliver our services to our residents and be a strong driving force for the local economy. How? Because just like during COVID, we've adapted to the challenges and officers have risen to the occasion magnificently. For the record, I have no doubt that but for COVID, we would have achieved 100% of those savings and investment targets. Mr. Mayor, the opposition has stated that council's finances were in difficulty before COVID. I've got to ask, where have they been for the last 10 years? For those newer councillors, perhaps, where have they been in the last 3 years? Since I was appointed the finance portfolio holder, I have consistently used my budget speech to remind everyone of the difficulties that local councils of all colours face across the UK. In 2010, we received £9 million in grant funding. We now receive nothing. In real terms, our annual funding is £7 million less than it should be. Eastbourne is not isolated in having to manage its finances despite a historic and continued lack of government support for local authorities. We know that there are still some councils who are continuing their discussions as their requests were submitted later. We also know that so far, councilisation for 6 councils have been agreed, with 4 so far accepting the conditions. Rob Whiteman, CEO of the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, stated that 12 authorities are in talks with MHCLG, and he thinks 12 probably is the tip of the iceberg. BBC analysis showed that 9 out of 10 major authorities did not have enough cash to cover their spending plan, and coronavirus could lead to them going 1.7 billion over budget. Reports from SIPFA state that councils across the UK have seen a real-term reduction of £800 million in their reserves in 2020 compared with 2019. MHCLG reports also show that councils are forecasting a £2 billion black hole due to business rates appeals. Public Finance has also reported that COVID-19 has left councils more than £1 billion short of their expected in council tax reserves. These are unprecedented figures and shows the volatility of our income. Universally, it seems that organisations agree that the way that the system of funding local government finances is broken, and COVID has only exacerbated this trend massively. A recent report by the LGC stated that 4/5 of senior officers and councils consider the council finance system unsustainable. Mr. Mayor, in that same report, 75% of respondents stated that they were very concerned about the impact of COVID on the council's financial positions. 40% had made cuts within the year. 34% of councils did not know whether or not their authorities would have to issue a Section 114 notice without additional further funding. I can only conclude that there is uncertainty across councils on the long-term state of their finances. This is not new. Mr. Mayor, last year at my budget presentation, I stated that the system for funding local government is broken and asked the MP to join us in finding ways of reviewing how government can support local councils can continue providing vital services. I renew these calls today. Mr. Mayor, despite this uncertain income, the calls on our services have increased. I know you are passionate about homelessness and rough sleeping, and your work to support the groups is well known. Tonight, we will be discussing the pressures of temporary accommodation placements on our town from other areas. Not to preempt any discussion, but simply put, and to quote the independent assessor, Homelessness is the council's single largest pressure area. Temporary accommodation is expensive, and the additional pressures caused by homelessness amount to over £1 million in 2020-2021. Mr. Mayor, we must do everything we can to reduce the burden of homelessness, not only because of the cost it brings to this authority, but also, more importantly, the real damage it causes our society. In this aspect, I welcome the pioneering work of our local Russ Leaper initiative. Mr. Mayor, this authority has come under attacks from the opposition for our investment strategy. Once again, I wholeheartedly refute their allegations. Mr. Mayor, as stated, this authority welcomed the independent review of its governance and finances by the Local Government Association and MHCLG. In their review of our authority, the Local Government Association stated that prior to the pandemic, the council has managed significant financial pressures, particularly around homelessness and housing. It has a strong track record in commercial investment as well as delivering savings. Additionally, the LGA confirmed that a very significant asset base, the council has a very significant asset base and has used this to help fund revenue expenditure, guide regeneration, meet housing need, and drive forward economic development. Our investments and assets are currently undergoing an extensive review as part of our Recovery and Reset programme that will determine our actions going forwards. We are committed to achieving value for money, and the capitalisation loan from the government allows us a limited time to prepare and plan. This is, as I've already stated, a stabilisation period for the council. We will not be conducting any fire sales of our assets. Our aim is to lead the way in helping our business communities, our residents and our partners by creating opportunities for future prosperity and by securing a long-term sustainable financial position. This budget is laying the basis by managing the uncertainties within the capitalisation limit. We will continue with our investments in new homes for our families and act to support our town as it emerges from COVID-19. Projects like Victoria Mansions and Bedford Well Road are well underway and will provide high-quality housing stocks for our families. In doing so, as well as addressing the housing need challenges, we are contributing towards creating jobs and business opportunities for our residents and business communities. We will continue to support green initiatives and work to ensure this council fulfils the carbon neutral pledge by 2030. We will work with partners to continue to push for new cycle routes and public transport improvements as we take advantage of a green revival. We will continue to seek new tourism opportunities, investing in assets like the UK's busiest bandstand and seafront lighting, and ensure that Eastbourne remains a safe, attractive place to live, work and play in. Our recovery relies on us continuing our strong partnership with those around us. Organisations such as the 3VA, the CAB, the EHA, the Chamber of Commerce and Eco Action Network and RNP will all play a vital role in aiding the recovery of our town. I really enjoyed my time working with Councillor Lamb in our recovery panel, and only by all of us in this room, online, working together, will we help drive the economy and increase the resiliency and recovery of Eastbourne. This authority is making significant progress in identifying more savings and efficiencies whilst helping to restart the local economy in order to meet our expected budget shortfalls. Whilst tough, difficult decisions will need to be made, we will, as always, put the needs of our residents and businesses first. I have every confidence that this authority under this administration will continue to rise to the challenge. We've done it many times before, and we will do it again. Mr. Mayor, in closing, I have the privilege of submitting this budget to Council for approval, knowing that it will be a major part in our town's recovery post-COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. I now call upon Councillor Smart to respond, as well as to present his amendments. Councillor Smart, you have 17 minutes. 17 minutes. Councillor Smart, please.
Councillor Robert Smart, Meads Ward, Opposition Group Leader. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening all councillors and residents who may be listening. First of all, I want to add my sympathies to all those who have been cruelly affected by this dreadful virus. I pay tribute to the people in Eastbourne for the generous and disciplined way in which they have responded to this unprecedented crisis. I also want to thank officers and employees of the council for their adaptability, and I applaud all the employees that Councillor Holt has referred to in the various departments. There has been an awful lot of good work done, and I would particularly commend the speed in which systems were operated to disperse the whole range of government grants. It has been a difficult year, but our huge success regarding vaccines is allowing the mists to clear and a roadmap to be defined. Although delayed, it will be wonderful to have Eastbourne buzzing this summer at the latest. I trust those who still hanker after the discredited EU have noted the EU's dismal performance on vaccination and its childish and hypocritical threat to close the Northern Irish border. In the Vaccinations League, UK 10, EU 0 point. In fact, they're not in the Premiership. But I digress from the local business before us. We are asked to approve the annual budget and council tax as proposed. Actually, we're asked to approve budgets for 2 years, a revised budget for this year and an original budget for next year. It is tedious, but we are in fact dealing with 4 years. The final audited accounts for 18-19 and 19-20 have still to be presented to us. That's an awful long time ago. We do not even know whether or not break-even was achieved in these years. Budgeting can be just numbers on a piece of paper to create the illusion of a break-even position bearing little resemblance to reality. This administration is very good at proposing wholly unrealistic budgets, but are not so good at reporting their lack of achievement. It moves rapidly on to future years without analysing the recent past. From my own investigations, for instance, I have dug out adverse variances against the budget for 1920, that's last year, which still hasn't been audited, of over £500,000 on waste and over 800,000 on tourism and enterprise. These are huge variances when compared to the proposed increase in council tax for next year of less than £100,000. We could have a very short debate if it were only about council tax, but there is a lack of financial control and monitoring based on past unrealistic budgets. A root and branch review is required of both the form and content of the council's financial processes. Perhaps the external assurance review required by government to be completed by the end of May will lead to this. I and my colleagues have been offering to help in recent years. Councillors are asked to approve a revised budget for the current year, which in itself is unusual. The financial summary, which was provided as Appendix 1, it's only one sheet of paper, to the Cabinet papers, is not even provided within the full council papers. But perhaps you are able to refer to it. Certainly councillors may have copies of it. This summary shows a revised net deficit for the current year of £5.6 million, which when added to redundancy and setup costs of £1.2 million, gives £6.8 million as the figure requested from government as a bailout for this year. There is an additional £6 million bailout for next year. The administration has sought to distort the rationale for this deficit and to blame it on loss of income from tourism. We are as sad as anyone about the enforced closure of our wonderful tourism activities, but please let's not distort the facts. After allowing for savings from not operating, and there are savings, furlough payments and the income recovery grant from government, the net shortfall on recoverable income losses, including tourism facilities, car parking, cemeteries, etc., are really £1.7 million. Actually, I think in Councillor Holt's speech, he probably suggested it might be 1.9 million. So we're not terribly far apart now. But what I want to get over is that the shortfall on income is not the major contributor to the net shortfall, net deficit that the council is facing. Had Eastbourne been prudently managed in recent years, the council would have sufficient reserves to cover this shortfall, 1.7 million or 1.9 million. Other local councils do have adequate reserves. A year ago, I referred to the savings and income targets as simply not credible, and so it has turned out. The underlying precarious financial position of the council existed before COVID. The offer by the government of capitalisation offers the council a lifeline of 1 year in which to put its house in order. The Section 151 officer concludes, you'll find this on page 32, those who have the agenda pack, that a great deal will depend on the council's ability to meet the requirements of the capitalisation directions granted to it and the ability of the council to deliver the savings identified. Too true. It is by no means certain that the council will be able to meet the conditions of the direction, but as in our amendment, we are pleased that the government is providing the council with the opportunity to avoid a Section 114 regime. These uncertainties are too large for any meaningful line-by-line review of the draft budget presented for next year. Many lines are very similar to this year. One item, however, caught my eye. We are concerned that the Cabinet's recent recommendation on waste collection will not be brought to full council until May. Why is it not being brought to this meeting as the budget recommendations have? Apparently, the change will save £250,000 a year. I believe there's a press release on that. So I'm surprised to see the waste budget increase by over 200,000. That is a difference of over £450,000. It's a large number. This in itself is many times the proposed increase in council tax, but that is just one line. The council's budgets for the current year and next are wholly dependent upon the lifeline potentially given for this year of £6.8 million and £6 million next year, but they are a long way from certainties. For a start, these are limits and may not be achieved. How are the budgets balanced if the limits are not achieved? It is clear that any shortfall caused by COVID couldn't possibly justify £6.8 million this year, and so even less likely next year. The first condition of the capitalisation bailout is that the authority may only capitalise expenditure when it is incurred. May I refer you to Appendix 1 again? The bottom line says it all. The 6.8 million and the 6 million for next year application is described as an application of capitalisation direction, which will balance the books, is to be allocated to costs. As yet, it hasn't been allocated. They were not allocated when incurred and still haven't as far as I know, but await retrospective and presumably arbitrary allocation. That's 6.8 million and 6 million. Perhaps the most pertinent condition is that the authority will undergo an external assurance review focused on its financial position, to be reported on by the end of May, with the intention of agreeing a plan to address any recommendations. It is therefore clear that the bailout is hugely conditional, and any budget made before the results of this review is frankly of little merit. That is why it is imperative, as our amendment suggests, that a revised budget be prepared following this review. It has been suggested that there may be a need for the sale of assets over a period. As Councillor Holt says, it will be over a long period to avoid a fire sale, and the estimated proceeds of such a sale reflected in future realistic budgets. They're not in the current budgets. It is fortunate that the council does have assets that it can sell, other than the administration's previous misguided proposal to sell the downland farms. by coincidence, the amount they're looking at there is approximately £12.8 million. It is suggested that the council will borrow to cover the accounting deficit. There's a mixture of an accounting deficit and cash flow issues. We have never been provided with cash flow or liquidity statements. In fact, my request at the recent scrutiny committee for this was rejected by the Liberal Democrats on that committee. Transparency? So I asked the Cabinet Member for Finance when the council would go bust without borrowing the £6.8 million. It is presumably a liquidity issue. I urge the administration to vote for the amendment in my name. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Thank you. OK, we now open the debate to the floor. I'm assuming that Councillor Holt and Councillor De Cara will reserve their right to speak. Both Councillor Smart and Councillor Holt will have an opportunity to sum up towards the end. But I'm now going to open up the discussion to the floor. Councillor Maxted, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Robin Maxted. I wish to speak against this amendment. Mr. Mayor, when I was younger and would have been applying for a mortgage, I mean, it was a very scary thing. I'd have had to have gone cap in hand to the all-powerful building society manager, and he'd have made me feel 2 inches tall for even daring to ask for a loan. He'd have told me how lucky I was and how I would be if they deemed me fit to have a mortgage approved, and I'd be expected to have been externally grateful. I'm sure Councillor Smart, I can't see him on the video link tonight, but I'm sure he remembers those days. And it seems, to use Councillor Smart's word, it seems that he's still hankering after those times. I mean, this is not a bailout. The government is lending the council some money. And I mean, times have changed now. Nowadays, lenders are falling over themselves to lend money. We don't have to be, what does he say? Pleased to receive the offer of exceptional financial support. I mean, the government should be the ones who are grateful for receiving the interest rates that they've attached to this loan. And also, I think he and his fellow councillors should appreciate the mere fact that the government has lent this council this money means that they consider Eastbourne Borough Council to be a worthy credit risk. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maxted. I've got Councillor Diplock, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Maxted, I wish I was as eloquent as you are. You've pretty much said everything I wanted to say. The one thing I will add here is I do find it very difficult to take seriously an amendment that's been submitted less than an hour before we actually go into the meeting. To me, that smacks of just, well, it's silly. How can you possibly take that seriously? And Councillor Smart refers to a bailout. It is not a bailout. It is a loan that will be paid back. And as Councillor Maxted says, it demonstrates our creditworthiness to the government. And if you're talking about a bailout, I'd look at East Sussex County Council. I mean, Conservative leader Keith Glazers had a bailout of 37% to his salary from a couple of years ago, bailed out by the taxpayers of the county. And it almost incenses me to hear this talk bandied around when we know that the taxpayers of East Sussex County Council get a much worse deal than the taxpayers of the borough. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Diplock. Councillor Murray, please.
Thank you. Councillor Murray. We all know that Councillor Smart is very good at quoting pieces out of context to sort of make the point that he's trying to get across. He's very good at this, but we know that the Eastbourne Borough Council has been doing a fantastic job up until now. Before we had COVID, we were in a very good state. We were making investments, we were providing affordable housing, and the investments which we were making were looking as though that they were going to all sort of pay out for us. The reason why we've been given this grant is, this loan, is because we were in a good position before we went into COVID. And to quote from the same page that Councillor Smart has come from, the conclusion from the officer, taking all of the above into account, as the Council's Chief Financial Officer, I am satisfied that the budget proposals set out in this report are robust and that the level of reserves are adequate to address the financial risk facing the Council. And it then goes on to make the quote afterwards that Councillor Smart said. But what they're saying initially is that we're in a good position to be able to pay this loan back. And the only reason that we're in that good position is because of good financial care for the Council up until COVID struck in March 2020. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Dell, I was tempted to ignore you, but I won't. Councillor Dell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, just wanted to talk on the amendment, really. I find it extraordinary that the words within that are being used, particularly things around offer of exceptional financial support from the government. One of the comparisons I've used a couple of times in meetings is that with the CBILS loan, where the government supported businesses to trade through the COVID pandemic. And the difference with that is that during the pandemic, the council requirement went up. The demands on the council staff went up. There was no opportunity to furlough any staff. Our costs went up as a result of supporting the most vulnerable in our community. And we now have a situation where we have applied for support from the government. And not only have they lent us the money through the Public Sector Loans Board, they've added a punishing 1% to that, which I find extraordinary. I sort of think that, you know, bearing in mind all the promises were made about supporting the local authorities who were delivering the frontline services to our communities, you would have thought that the government would at least have supported the local authorities to then be able to trade through this to get back on track. But instead of that, they added a punishing 1% to the loan. Also, when you compare the CBILS loan, it gave a 12-month interest-free and 12-month repayment holiday. Well, we haven't got that as a local authority, so the organisations that actually are providing these valuable services to our communities are being penalised by government. I think that's absolutely extraordinary. So I really don't know where the offer exceptional financial support from the government is. I think that as an organisation, and I accept the fact when I first got elected that we're going into a period where local authorities are becoming self-sufficient and the government grants are reduced to almost zero. And I relish that challenge in so much as we can be entrepreneurial, ambitious and creative. And I think we are exactly that. But to have this situation now thrust upon us where we're now being penalised through the money that's being lent to us, I think is extraordinary, an extraordinary position to take, and even more extraordinary to have the amendment that's been put in this evening. So I really cannot possibly support that. And I just think that we should look at the true impact on the local authority, the services we provided, and I think that the government really needs to reconsider how it applies the support to local authorities over the next 5 years or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dale. Councillor Shuttleworth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Shuttleworth. Can I start by thanking Councillor Holt for his presentation and indeed for all the work that he's done, because this year has been an extremely challenging one for anyone. Budget times are always challenging, but this year particularly challenging. And I'd like to echo his comments about the staff of the council at every level, who've done an absolutely magnificent job, and I'm forever getting members of the public who are commenting to me about how pleased and surprised at the level of service that the council's been able to do. We talked a bit about the waste collection tonight. I mean, the service that's been delivered there is second to none. and our council officers work in areas like delivery of the support grants that have gone out to businesses, done a magnificent job there. In the area that I have responsibility for with housing, the help that's been given to so many people at this difficult time, to give them an opportunity to stay in their house. People who have been threatened with a situation where they're at risk of becoming homeless have been helped by a whole range of preventative work. So there's an enormous amount been going on despite all the challenges, and I think we ought to recognise that and say a big thank you to our staff. And also on that front with the COVID situation, obviously the work of the community hub, again, and all the voluntary sector in the town that has really stepped up to help people. So a lot to be proud of in this town. Eastbourne really has stepped up, you know, with a lot of partnership work and a lot of good work to help people get through what has been an incredible, challenging time. Coming on to the budget debate, I have to say I'm disappointed with Councillor Smart and indeed by the opposition. I've been a councillor over the years for I suppose about 30 years now, and I'm used to budget times. And at budget time, what happens is that the ruling group, whether it happens to be us or whether it happens to be, as it has been on some occasions, the Conservatives and is at the moment at County Hall, present a budget. If you're in opposition, you then put forward your own proposals. You know, it's one thing to criticise whoever's running the town or the county, but what you should do at budget time is put forward some financial measures, some of your own ideas about what you would do differently. That's what a budget is. Now, I'm looking at the budget amendment and it's nothing. There's no suggestions of any change, of any new ideas, of any movement of any monies. There's nothing in there. Now, I wonder, am I really that surprised? Because we had the same last year. There was no budget from the opposition last year. And Councillor Smart says a lot about, you know, how this administration is failing in some way. He completely overlooks the fact, by the way, that Eastbourne Borough Council was awarded the IEASY Awards on 2 occasions as top council for its financial competence and investment. It was recognised. It has been recognised. Other councils up and down the country have come to look at Eastbourne to see how things are done. So I wasn't surprised that the government wanted to obviously step in and recognise the impact that COVID has had on our tourist town, because the government, to be fair, recognised the fact that Eastbourne is very well run, and that the losses of income that we suffered, the loss of income that Councillor Smart seems to have missed somewhere down the line, because he starts talking about losses of income of 1.7 million. I mean, there's over 2 million loss of income on the theatres for a start before we get into all the other areas. So, you know, there is an incredible challenge that we face as a council. The financial people on the council, I pay tribute there, have done a great job already, and all the departments working hard to already achieve a large amount of the savings that we need, and that hasn't been easy. The recovery team have been working really hard, and again I pay tribute to Steve Holt and indeed to Councillor Lamb. A lot of work gone on there to prepare the ground to make sure that as a town we will bounce back from this. So what we have today is we've got a budget that's been moved by Councillor Holt that I think is a good budget for the town going forward. I haven't had time to go into some of the really positive stuff in there, but can I just mention that part of that is about our investment for affordable housing and doing things to help people in this town who want to get onto the housing ladder. There's a lot of good stuff in the budget, and I'm really disappointed that there's nothing come forward from the opposition today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. Councillor Burton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Conservative tactics seem to be that if you repeat rhetoric often enough, then people will start to believe it. I didn't actually count how many times Councillor Smart used the word bailout in that speech, but it was quite a few, and repeated in messaging to the Herald and locally. However, that does not make it true. As Councillor Holt pointed out, we have suffered 3.7 million in costs due to COVID, and we've been given 1.8 million in support, and that is despite being assured that we would have those costs recovered by the government. Allowing us to borrow money is not the same as giving us money to repay those costs. So I just wanted to point that out. I was at the scrutiny meeting that Councillor Smart mentioned, and it was very clearly explained to Councillor Smart that council finances are very different to a regular business, and a cash flow statement would not be appropriate. Again, it's a misrepresentation of what happened at that meeting. It's frustrating that there is no different budget to look at. The statement that he's made, the amendment that he's made, it says really nothing. And again, to say that Eastbourne Council is pleased to receive the offer of exceptional financial support, we are pleased to be able to make that borrowing. However, I'm sure we would have preferred the costs of COVID to be given back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. As it stands, I have no. Oh, here we go. Councillor Bannister, please. Councillor Bannister, and then Councillor Swansborough, then Councillor DeCara. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Margaret Bannister, Councillor for Devonshire Ward and lead member for Tourism and Enterprise. I felt I had to come in here because tourism and enterprise has been hit so badly by this, and we are the main reason that the council has lost so much money this year. 2019 had been a bumper year for Eastbourne, with 5.4 million people coming into the town and an estimated tourism spend by them of £530 million. This time last year, we were looking forward to another bumper year. The Congress had reopened and we had some wonderful shows to look forward to. The Welcome Building was up and running, and we were expecting several conferences to come to the town. The effect of the first lockdown was felt straight away with everything closing. Councillor Holt has already mentioned how the tourism department immediately opened the Welcome Building. As he said, other staff manned phones and offered support. The tourism department came up trumps, and I'm really proud of them. All the events for the summer had to be cancelled, such as the International Tennis Week and Airborne, as well as the shows at the theatres and bandstands. This had a devastating effect not only on the council's income, but also on the town. Hotels, restaurants and retail outlets rely on our tourism offer to attract visitors to the town and their businesses. Many are now under threat of closure or struggling because of this lack of activity, even when lockdown finished the first time and has been made worse by the second and third lockdowns. Tourism department had to react straight away. It soon became evident that we were going to have problems. A restructure was already in the budget for the year, but this became more vital with all the problems of the lack of income. This restructure had to be more radical than it had originally been planned because of this. In all, 52 people were made redundant from the permanent staff, with many casuals also being told they would not be needed this year. People that had been with EBC for many years had to leave. This was not an easy time for anyone in the tourism department, but I would like to pay tribute to Phil Evans, my director, Annie Wills, his assistant, and the HR department, who did so much work with this in such a sympathetic and professional way. I certainly hope we don't ever have to go through that again. We did, when possible, do our best to encourage visitors to town. The TIC has moved into the Welcome Building and is reporting that business is better than it was in the old building. The stage door has remained open for most of the year, delivering and serving takeaways. And while this has not made a great amount of money, it has covered its cost. The drive-in movies we held in Princes Park were some of the first in the country and were well attended and provided much needed entertainment for residents and visitors. The Congress reopened a cinema, which proved that Eastbourne, we were once again open for business. The one event that we did hold was the Beachhead Marathon, which proved very popular, and even Mr. Mayor took part in it. It won national acclaim from a writer in one of the national papers who said that it was held in such a positive way in the difficult times, and already 2,000 people have booked for this year's marathon. The tourism department knows that things are still precarious as regards its budget and that savings need to be made, but are hopeful they can pull it round. Income targets have been set for us and savings put forward. Staff are working very hard to get things up and running. They're working to get the shows in the Congress as well as conferences into the Welcome Building. Indeed, some hybrid conferences have already taken place. Since the Prime Minister's announcement on Monday, agents and producers have been contacting Jordan to firm up dates. Many shows that were planned for last year immediately rescheduled and then had to be cancelled again. But they are now coming back to have another date in the diary. So watch this space. There will be some wonderful shows coming back to the town. Work at the Winter Gardens is progressing well and the building should be ready for use by the end of April. Although the lift will not be ready for a few weeks after that, the lift shaft is in place. A change in place facility will be installed on the ground floor of the Congress once work is finished in the Winter Gardens. And I'm pleased to report there's not a free weekend to be had in the Winter Gardens from October to December already. The ALTA have confirmed they will be holding the tennis again this year in some form or another. Last week, we made the difficult decision to cancel Airborne, as no matter where we were in the pandemic, we were not prepared to take the risk of massive crowds descending on the town and causing an outbreak of the virus. I know a lot of people are disappointed by this, and I know that it's going to impact on the town, but for the sake of safety, we were not prepared to take the risks. The events team are, however, planning a series of COVID-safe events through the summer. My staff have proved, not only over the last year, but over many years before, that they are prepared to put time and effort into everything they do because they know it has such a major impact on the wider community. We just need to work through these times so that by the end of the year, we can be fully back in business, not only for the sake of these BC coffers, but for the town as a whole. I would just like to finish by paying tribute to Phil.
Councillor Bannister, I think you've been muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
Did I mention Phil?
You did.
Right, okay.
Thank
Phil?
you, Councillor.
Sorry?
Thank you, Councillor Bannister. Councillor Swansborough, please, followed by Councillor De Cara.
Sorry, can I just finish about Phil?
Yes, go on, quick.
All right. Oh, you want to work in the ward with the mayor, I tell you. Phil came to EBC in 2015, just before I became lead member for the department. He came with a wide-ranging background in local, national and international tourism, which has been invaluable over his time with us, but especially in the last year. He always knows who to talk to or which town to go to discuss any new ideas. He's been a stalwart in his Director of Tourism role, ensuring projects and events to deliver on time. The work he's put into overseeing the revamp of the Devonshire Quarter, the introduction of new events such as the Walking Festival, as well as the taking back in-house of the Downs Golf Course and Sovereign Centre, has been enormous. He's been a committed member of CMT and I'm sure he will be missed there. The good news is that he will still be doing consultancy work for EBC over the next few months to support department as we move forward. Could I please have it noted in the minutes that the council thanks Phil and offer our best wishes for his future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bannister. As your last minute was nothing to do with the budget, I'll be lenient. Councillor Swansborough next, please, followed by Councillor De Cara. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colin Swansborough, Hampden Park. We got the sound again of Robert Smart scraping the bottom of the barrel, claiming that the council was in trouble before COVID. Well, we had some difficulties before COVID because one word that's dropped out of the English language over the last year is that word austerity. Austerity was the method by which the Conservative government was reducing the amount of funds available to local government and making us go into a situation where we had to generate our own income. But we faced up to that. And the truth about the council's financial affairs before COVID is that they were being managed properly, efficiently, and as efficiently as ever. And if you have a look at our 2020 balance sheet, all balanced up properly, no need for concern. See, the Tories are great ones for criticising the council's reserves as if they would have managed better. bearing in mind that they never come up with any viable alternative to our financial policies. It's difficult to know how they would, in fact, change the reserves. Also, they conveniently forget that the last time they were in control, the reserves were actually at rock bottom. When we took over, they were at rock bottom. So it's absolutely no doubt that the reason we needed government assistance was because of COVID. And the government have understood that and have expressed confidence in the council's ability to manage the finances in the future. You don't go around and allow people to borrow 6 million, 12.8 million pounds if you don't have confidence in the people to manage it properly. So that's a bit of a pat on the back from the government. I don't want to get carried away with the government because they actually haven't been over generous, have they, with the terms of the loan that they've given us. So there will be a handicap for us to carry on into the future. But that's what I wanted to talk about really, is the future, because we know things are looking up, don't you? You can feel it. You can feel that things are getting better, that we're going to come out of COVID. We're going to go back to what we all know, that we have a fantastic town with superb natural and man-made facilities. We've got a talented and educated workforce, backed by council and private investment, and not a small amount of council investment in that, I might add. Now, you do feel that we're turning the corner, and as Margaret has said, and I thought she spoke very well on that subject, our prospects are now brighter than they've been for some time. What actually we need now, at this point in time, is to make sure that we get our town back to where it belongs, and to do that, we all need to work together. To do that, we need to put our efforts together, and that means politically, it means that we're going to have to work together as well. I look forward to that in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Swansborough. I've got Councillor De Cara, followed by Councillor Belsey, please. Councillor De Cara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor De Cara, Sovereign Ward. First of all, I'd like to echo the sentiments of other speakers that the council staff have worked exceptionally hard in what can't be denied have been very difficult times. Councillor Swansborough talks about reserves. Well, I'd like to voice my concern about the reserves, about what level of reserves this council has. This administration has been constantly depleting them over the years. Reserves that, had they still been there, would have meant the council would have been in a much better position going into the pandemic. Not that I think you can be entirely sure what the reserves are, as has been mentioned. We've had no audited accounts for 2 years. Surely the idea is that you hold reserves for a rainy day. Well, this administration's umbrella seems to have a very large hole in it. It cannot be denied that the council is receiving exceptional financial support, and I believe the council should support the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor De Cara. Councillor Belsey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very short. Like Councillor Shuttleworth, I've been on this council for some years. And what annoys me nowadays is the hypocrisy I hear more than anything. Councillor Smart is putting forward what is an amendment, which he's entitled to do. And all we get is people like Councillor Diplock and Councillor Maxted and others just having a go at him. If he ever watches what happens at County Council, and you were there, Mr. Mayor, I believe that your party did exactly that at County Hall. And I just find, you know, it's like, it's just hypocritical what I hear, and I get quite annoyed with it, to be honest. But you know, what one group of people think might be the way forward and what another group of people think might be the way forward will always be different. And there are certain things in what we have done in Eastbourne over the years that have been really good, but there's other things that are not so good. And I think there's been some pretty awful decisions made over the last 5 years by Eastbourne Borough Council, and some of which are coming back to bite us now. So I'll leave it at that, but I'll be supporting the amendment, obviously. But I just find what is being said by those that are ruling the council very hypocritical.
Thank you, Councillor Belsey. As it stands, I have no Councillor Ounsell, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Ansell, Sovereign Ward. I would also like to start by recognising those unsung heroes, too many, of course, to name, but I wanted to highlight just two areas in particular, and one already raised is Annie Wilson and the team there, because in those very early days, the operation that they put in place to make sure people had those most basic provisions, food, was an absolute lifeline. And it was hugely impressive to see it pop up and at scale. And for me, representing the town, it was hugely inspiring to know that that help was coming on stream so quickly and supported by DEFRA. I'd also like to particularly thank the team that has sat on the community hub, because rather like food as a lifeline, communications, being able to reach out and know where help is coming from, to be able to be signposted to support, to be able to be connected to volunteers who are going to be stepping out, doing shopping, collecting medicines. This was all absolutely mission critical frontline work again. So I'd like to recognise our community hub team, and also, particularly as this is a virtual meeting, I think it's only appropriate to put a shout out for our technical teams who have enabled us to continue. It's not the same, but it does allow us still to move forward. And it's been a leap for our authorities and all sectors actually across the nation to be able to operate in this way. I'd also like Councillor Bannister, to echo those thanks and best wishes to Phil Evans. I had the privilege of sitting on the interview panel back in the day when we recruited him to the authority. And I remember very well his impressive background with Visit England. And of course, I was most pleased to hear his warm words around what was a particular campaign at the time that I had championed, which was seeing Eastbourne designated as that eastern gateway town to the South Downs National Park. So thank you very much to Phil. And last but not least, the Eastbourne Hospitality Association, who has worked so very closely with others across the town to enable those respite periods between lockdown, where we were able to ease and we were able to reconnect, and there was that stimulus in the local economy, and whose good work around that COVID secure status will mean that we are ready to come back stronger. So in very difficult times, they have worked incredibly hard and very well in partnership. But I would like to also recognise the huge support that our town has received from our government. And that is before and during, and now proposing after. Before, we've heard tell of our great aspirations and our hopes for our conference centre. And of course, government funding sits behind that conference centre in the form of millions of pounds for Devonshire Park. We've heard earlier in this meeting about our plans for house building. And of course, government money sits behind one of our projects, Bedfordwell Road, around that enabling fund to make it safe to develop. We also have already the prospect of a new hospital, and this is a huge investment in our town and for our local people. So it is beyond question that this Conservative government has hugely invested in Eastbourne. In the pandemic too, the government has invested millions upon millions, whether it be in the local economy, whether it's supporting livelihoods, individual businesses. And of course, we heard how well the business teams have worked during the pandemic, and they've worked incredibly hard to make sure that those millions of pounds of government investment have reached our businesses, small, medium and larger businesses across the town. So I'm sorry that one or two colleagues here haven't been more positive about the support that the government is now giving. And I understand that there's some sensitivities about the language and the use of bailout, but I would ask the question, had the government not stepped in, what then? My understanding is bankruptcy. And in terms of that argument around the government recognising Eastbourne as creditworthy, I hope so, because I have certainly made that argument. I have talked about our future. I've talked about our prospects. I've talked about our huge potential. And I have petitioned for this support. So I hope they recognise that, because I believe in our town and I believe in its future.
Councillor Ansell, please, can you sum up, please?
I will sum up very quickly. But what I would add to that also is the government looks on our local authority and the services it provides, and it's stepping in to support our town, to support local people, to protect local people from what it would mean to have a bankrupt council. So I would ask, and I would urge councillors across the piece here to support the amendment. The amendment is proactive, it is most reasonable, it's responsible. And actually, it doesn't take a huge amount of wrestling with to understand it. It is simply providing the surety we need to demonstrate that we will move forward now purposefully and that we will be strong on a financial footing. And I worry that there is denial in the mix here, because it's not true to say that all was well before the pandemic. Redundancies were planned and there was the prospect of that sale already mentioned. And it only goes me, I'm not trying to make my very last point, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My very last point is I am not looking to make this political. I want us to work together. We need to work together in the interests of all the people we represent. But unless there is a level of honesty and acceptance that there were endemic problems before the pandemic, then I fear we will not have then the capacity to understand what changes need to be made, because redundancies were planned before COVID. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I applaud the modern technology we're using this evening, but so many of you have got your watches missing. Can I urge you all to try and stick to the 5 minutes? I know it's difficult, but I urge you all to try and stick to 5 minutes. Councillor Morris next, please, followed by Councillor Whippy. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Amanda Morris, Old Town. I'm just coming back on Councillor Ansell actually saying if the government hadn't stepped in, what then? If the government hadn't taken 9 million in government grants, would we actually need a loan from the government? 2 million bounce back loans have been applied for, 1.5 million have been approved. Due to the loss in the grants from the government, Eastbourne Borough Council now has to run like a business. So we are now borrowing money as a loan, not a bailout. And along with all the other businesses that are having to borrow money, are the opposition criticising all the businesses that are asking for a loan, or just Eastbourne Borough Council?
Thank you. Councillor Whippy, please.
Good evening, Councillor Whippy from St Anthony's. It was really just getting back to Councillor Smart. When he was elected, his voters put their faith in him as an elected councillor. And I just wanted to remind him that with great power comes great responsibility. And as in my day job as an officer of the court, I have a duty not to mislead the court. He also has a duty to his voters not to put out misleading information in the Herald and in the council speeches. And I plead with him not to misrepresent the facts and to make sure that he gives the proper facts to his voters, please, because we all have a duty to our voters, and I feel very disappointed tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Whippy. I have no other speakers indicated, so Councillor Councillor Freebody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah.
Councillor Freebody, please.
Can you hear me? Can you
yes,
hear me?
you can. Yes, I
You
can hear you. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll start again. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think some of the tributes have already been paid earlier on by others regarding council staff and many people across the town that have helped out in unprecedented times. So I just wanted to echo those thoughts. This does go date pre-COVID, and there was some comments by fellow councillors that seem to forget the mess that we were in pre-COVID. Councillor Holt, you asked where we've been for the last 5 years or 10 years, etc. Well, we've been at these meetings stating up how much debt the council's racking up, the black holes in the finances. You just have to look at the minutes. It's great now that we've got these things online because we can actually see the speeches that have been made by individuals. But we've been highlighting this for years and years. The problems that the council have got date pre-COVID. We asked for a budget book. We got that. I think it was a bit of a Christmas present. I think it was probably about 9 months later than it should have been last year. Now, some of that, obviously, I would expect officers to concentrate all their efforts at the beginning of the pandemic, which they did a fabulous job then. But those facts and figures, as usual, were very late. Councillor Smart's already alluded to the audited accounts that have still not been signed off. And Councillor Diplock, you said about the amendment you got an hour beforehand. Well, actually, that's quite good because normally I've sat on East Sussex before when amendments have come across from the Liberal Democrat group in the debate. So it's, you know, the chairman at the time, or be Mayor Hill, will say, are there any amendments? And suddenly this piece of paper come flying everywhere. So please don't, you know, please don't state that it's just the Conservative group that do this, but at least you got over an hour's notice this time. So I think the points have been very well made about the amendment to the debate. And I have to echo some of Councillor Ansell's comments. We may disagree on several things, and we may disagree as councillors, but can we please stop some of the language used attacking Councillor Smart? You can attack some of the ideas or some of the proposals put together, but to refer to Councillor Smart as scraping the barrel and using that kind of language in the virtual council chamber, I don't think is helpful for local democracy, and is not helpful for the broader debate elsewhere. Let's not forget, if you look in the council papers, council debt by 2024, so in 3 years' time, is forecast to be £226 million. That's on a revenue budget of 14 million pounds a year. That's incredible. And when we talk about prudential investments, and I raised the Hamden Park issue here, this was an investment that was made, and a few months later, Hamden Park was worth less than the council actually paid for it in the first place. Now, I'm all for helping out, and I always have done over the last 5-6 years now, my time as a councillor, helping out in this. We cannot put forward an amended budget because the budget isn't balanced in the first place. We cannot get through to the figures to scrutinise it properly. Councillor Smart raised this at the scrutiny meeting. I noticed Councillor Burton said about the cash flow, but actually it's a very simple thing. You want to see where the money's coming in and where the money's going out, and that's your cash flow. You can do that for a private business, you can do it for a council. And when we talk about pre-COVID, you know, these financial pressures have been going on for ages. We looked at as somebody said earlier, the potential sale of the Downland Farms. So yes, the council has done some amazing work, and you know, I applaud those at the beginning of the pandemic who worked so fast. I mean, lightning fast, and they should be applauded for that. But please don't think that the council's problems regarding their finances are due to COVID, because this was happening a lot more before COVID. And the government, as well, as Councillor Ansell said, you know, the government have given what, £1.3 million to Fisherman's Quay. There's 14,000 jobs in the town that have been saved through the furlough scheme. £46 million in business grants to large, medium and small businesses. The £1.7 million COVID grant. I will sum up, Mr. Mayor. The Cultural Recovery Fund of almost £1 million there. So yes, there are some good things there, but actually please don't think that COVID is to blame for the council's financial position, precarious one, because this has been going on for several years beforehand. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I have no others wishing to speak. I'm waiting for that to change, and it hasn't. So, Councillor Tutt, you reserved your right to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I start by thanking our staff for the wonderful work that they've done in response to COVID. It's so much has already been said, and I just associate myself with those comments due to the limited time I have available to me now. We're living in an unprecedented period, certainly in my lifetime. I've never seen anything like the COVID pandemic, and my thoughts are with all of those who have suffered and lost loved ones during the pandemic. It's right that we as a community and as a council have responded as a single unit on that, and I'd like to thank people across the political spectrum in that respect. I'm genuinely proud of the way that politicians put their differences aside and concentrated on protecting our community. So my thanks go to all in that respect. Yeah, I know that it's not easy being in opposition in another place. I have the privilege of leading an opposition group, and it's never that easy to put an amendment together, and you know that it's going to be torn apart as soon as you present it. Councillor Freebody said that there have been times when the Liberal Democrats have put it in late. It's true they have, but even when they've put them in a fortnight in advance and shared them, the Conservative group at East Sussex have said, oh no, that's far too late. We haven't had time to consider it. So yeah, that I guess is just a bit of the cut and thrust of politics. I do always look at any amendments that come forward, and it's good actually to see at least an amendment this year, because we haven't seen one for many years from the Conservatives. But when you actually look at it, it's not actually an amendment to the budget, is it? An amendment to the budget, and we do this at East Sussex, we either suggest you put more money in, or you take money out, or you move money around. There's nothing of that in this amendment. This tells us to thank the government for their generosity. And I get what Councillor Ansell said, and I thank her for lobbying on our behalf. And I recognise some of the monies that have come for investment in some of the infrastructure projects in Eastbourne, and I'm grateful for that. But as far as COVID's concerned, this is not overly generous. They haven't met all the cost of COVID, and they've given us not a single penny towards the loss of income, which government said that they would do at the start of the first lockdown. So there's a disconnect there. There are other disconnects in some of the comments that have been made. Reference has been made to reserves. Well, when we took control of the council in 2007, they were literally at rock bottom. We started building them up. Conservatives in budget debates told us we were building them too high and we shouldn't be adding too much to the reserves. We did it strategically, and we used those reserves to make up for lost income during the refurbishment of the Congress Theatre. That was just going into its first full season, and we had conferences and theatre shows booked, but they couldn't take place. And so our reserves had been run down to a point when they were due to be coming back up, and that didn't happen because the income tap was turned off literally overnight. So it wasn't an easy position to be in. As Councillor Holt has rightly said, if you suddenly lose 60% of your income, you're going to have to do something like take out a loan or cut your expenditure. That's the reality of the situation, and that's exactly what the government's doing. These are unprecedented times. They're borrowing billions of pounds, and those billions of pounds are going to have to be paid back, and I expect a Chancellor's budget in the not so distant future, maybe in the very near future, will start telling us all about some of the pain we're going to have to experience in repaying that. But that's money that's needed to be spent. I could go into great detail about some of the wasted millions in terms of what the government have spent, but I'll save that for another day. For now, let's come back to the fact that I believe genuinely that we're stronger when we work together. And I think there's been clear demonstration of that during the COVID outbreak, where we've worked to protect our community. So I'm a little bit sad of some of the comments that have been made. I think Councillor Ansell started off very well, and I associate myself with the first half of her speech. When she started talking about dishonesty, I parted company with her. We're not a dishonest council. We are open book in what we do. We share information with people, and we answer questions that come from the public or from other councillors. To suggest that there's any dishonesty anywhere is something that I would ask her to think again about and indeed retract. Let's put after this budget's debate's over, let's put our differences to one side again. Let's work together for the people of our town who have had the good faith to elect each and every one of us and expect us to act responsibly on their behalf.
Thank you, Councillor Tutt. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contribution. I'm now going to call upon Councillor Smart to sum up. Councillor Smart, can I just ask you, please, for the sake of the public who could be listening online, to read out your amendment, and then you'll have 5 minutes to sum up, and then I'll call upon Councillor Holt. Councillor Smart, please.
Yes, the amendment is in 3 parts. Eastbourne Borough Council is pleased to receive the offer of exceptional financial support from government, will fulfil its statutory obligations, and will revise its budget as necessary when the requirements of the capitalisation direction are known, including the recommendations from the mandated external assurance review. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Now you have 5 minutes to sum up to your amendment, please.
Well, an interesting mix of comments. Thank you very much. Some of them were a little bit off the pale. Robin, Councillor Maxted, they haven't lent the money yet, is the honest truth, I believe. Councillor Diplock, talking about glazier bailouts is a bit of a nonsense, frankly, and it is a bailout. Councillor Murray talks about the council being before COVID in a very good state. That is demonstrably not the position. And if people are, Councillor Ansell uses the term denial, and that is the point. There's quite a lot of agreement between us, but if you start from a position that the council was not in a bad state before COVID, then you are misunderstanding the position. Councillor Dow talks about penalisation. I'm not sure. Councillor Shuttleworth, you get disappointed that we're not putting forward an alternative budget. Let me tell you, the budget that was put forward, the amendment that was put forward at East Sussex County Council in terms of their budget was 1% of their revenue. It was absolutely simplistic. Offering a load of money in terms of money they're already spending and just adding a few extra items to it is frankly just playing to the crowds. To put forward a serious alternative budget would take far longer, and I have to say I'm not sure that the officer time is actually there for us to do it. Councillor Burton, I have to say to you again, it is a bailout. Councillor Bannister, I've explained in terms of the tourism position. Councillor Swansborough talks to me about me scraping the bottom of the barrel. I don't think so. We ought to be able to have a realistic position on this. Councillor Ansell used the right word in terms of denial, and that is what many of the councillors are. I would particularly like to refer to Councillor Tutt's point, because I've been accused of misleading. If Councillor Whippy wants to come back to me in terms of where she thinks I've misled, perhaps it won't happen at this meeting, but I can assure you I have not said anything that is misleading to my electors. But in terms of Councillor Tutt's point, and I wrote down, and let's check the videotape. I think Councillor Tutt said that the government had not paid a penny for loss of income. That is absolute outright nonsense. Does he recognise the income recovery grant? I know in all of the press releases that have been released, no reference is made to the income recovery grant. I've said that effectively the shortfall was £1.7 million. I'm quite prepared to accept Councillor Holt's point of £1.9 million. In our position, we believe if the council had been run prudently before, there would be adequate money in reserves to actually cover that. Finally, I also want to remind Councillor Holt of my question in the first place. When would the council go bust if it doesn't get the 6.8 million? And when do you expect to receive the funds, which might not be as much as 6.8 million? It was only up to 6.8 million. There's no certainty. If you, in addressing our amendment, and several of you suggested you will vote against it, there are 3 parts. I'd like to understand which of the 3 parts you actually object to. Eastbourne Borough Council is pleased to receive the offer of exceptional financial support from government. Difficult to complain about that. Will fulfil its statutory obligations. Difficult to complain about that. Will revise its budget as necessary when the requirements of the capitalisation direction are known, including recommendations from the mandated external assurance review. Absolutely necessary. Why on earth wouldn't you agree to that? Let us understand, if you're going to vote against the amendment, which of those 3 you have a problem with. We believe that there should be a proper budget drawn out when you have the recommendations from the mandated external assurance review. And I will relate this to item 10 on the agenda and propose that we have a full council meeting in September to consider that budget. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Councillor Holt, you have 5 minutes to sum up. Councillor Holt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you everybody for the debate. I think, thankfully, we probably won't go viral, so it's not going to be a hands-filled council, I hope, but you never know, this night's still relatively young. A couple of points that I want to refer to, if I may. First of all, Councillor Smart, I just wanted to give you sort of a comparator of our council tax increases, because it was mentioned, and you mentioned it a couple of times. Since 2007, cumulatively, and it's a word I struggle with, so apologies, but cumulatively, East Sussex County Council has had a 47% increase in their council tax. Eastbourne Borough Council has 26%. I would ask people to consider value for money. Many of those within the opposition stated that we were in financial difficulties beforehand. I kind of covered that, and apologies if maybe it wasn't clear, but I haven't denied that local government's finances were in difficulties. In fact, I've been talking about it, as I say, personally for the last 3 years. But don't just take my word for it. Richard Watts from the Local Government Association, councils had seen a £15 billion cumulatively cut in Whitehall grants. The sector was extremely challenged going into this COVID crisis. Robert Reitman, I've already referred to, but significant cutbacks during the past decade of public spending cuts. Alistair Jones is the Associate Politics Professor at the Local Government Research Centre for De Montfort University, stated that local governments are being left to flounder. This isn't new, and when you say that we're in denial, I am in absolutely no denial. I've referred to it within the budget speech to say this is going to be tough, and only by all of us putting aside our party political difference and working together will we all collectively come out of this and serve our residents best. And so again, I kind of implore you to sort of, I've seen your press statements and I've seen your letters, Councillor Smart, and I've read your columns. Let's just make sure we're always trying to be really accurate in what we say, because otherwise, you know, it's just all gumph. I'm pleased, actually, you referred to your amendment. Actually, when I was told at 5 o'clock that there was an amendment, I was really pleased, because I thought after 6 years, they've come up with some new ideas. There's going to be something different. I was thinking maybe it was Councillor Jenkins' budget from a few years ago, but we'll ignore that one. But as Councillor Freebody said, the records are on, and we were promised a Conservative amended budget in, I think, 2016. And it was ready, it was prepared, and it was coming. But anyway, regardless of that, I'm disappointed, because there was no suggestions of what you would like to see change. And Councillor Dakara, you mentioned about the reserves and the dwindling reserves, and you know, that's an interpretation, and I accept your interpretation of that. But the whole reason to have an amended budget and some new proposals is because I would like to challenge you and say, okay, completely understand your position on the reserves, and we might have to agree to disagree, but what would you have done differently, even now, with the benefit of hindsight, to plug that gap in government grant. And as of yet, I've heard nothing. We've heard nothing for years. Councillor Smart, you asked me what I object to in your amendments, and to be honest with you, the reason I won't be supporting is because I've kind of again covered it within my budget speech, and you've made statements which I know you make because you want to allude to the fact that we wouldn't abide by statutory regulations. Of course, we're going to abide by statutory regulations. Why wouldn't we? We're completely open, we're completely transparent, and we will continue to work, as I have said, with CITFA, hand in hand, so we can work together as a group, as a council, to get the best value and the best response for our authority. So, unsurprisingly, I won't be supporting your amendment. I do want to leave our viewers and our fellow councillors. Oh no, sorry, there's a couple of apologies. Councillor Smart, throughout you mentioned a lifeline, and I would say that with the cost of this interest rate and the Public Works Loan Board, it might be an unfortunate metaphor after 10 years of cuts to core frontline services to claim that this is a lifeline. The councilisation has not been permitted to put our house in order, as you've suggested. It's been permitted to allow the council to continue to deliver its core services and play a leading role in the borough's recovery. And I want to end the debate with this final thought. According to the BBC, the Conservative-controlled Peterborough City Council is currently receiving councilisation support from the government. It has stated that it will need to borrow £25 million to plug the budget shortfall. This is considerably more than us. Yet, to the BBC, the Conservative MP has pointed out that this extra support would not have been available if it was not recognised that Peterborough is a well-run city. It doesn't take much to recognise why there might be that disparity between your comments and theirs. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contribution to tonight's debate. I look forward to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contribution to the budget debate. As we all know, as a budget debate, this is a vote, a named vote, reference to the Local Government Act of 2014. I'll now hand over to Mr. Russell, and I think we're going to be voting on the amendment first. And when your name is called, it's for, against, or abstain. And once that's concluded, if required, we'll go to Councillor Holt's paper. Mr. Russell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Simon Russell, Head of Democratic Services. So just to reiterate, we are voting on Councillor Smart's budget amendment first. So when I call out your name, please say whether you're for, against, or abstaining. So Councillor Ansell.
For.
Councillor Bannister.
Against.
Councillor Belsey.
For.
Councillor Burton.
Against.
Councillor Chowdhury.
Against.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor DeCara.
For.
Councillor Diplock.
Against.
Councillor Dowell.
Against.
Councillor Freebody.
For.
Councillor Holt.
Against.
Councillor Lamb. Councillor Lamb. I think you're on mute at the moment.
Sorry, for.
Thank you. Councillor Maxted.
Against.
Councillor Metcalfe.
For.
Councillor Mear.
Against.
Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Murdoch.
For.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Rodahan.
Against. Against. Against.
Thank you. Councillor Shuttleworth.
Against.
Councillor Smart.
For.
Councillor Swansborough.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Tutt.
Against.
Councillor Vaughan.
Against.
Councillor Wallace.
Abstain.
Councillor Whippy.
Against.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, that amendment has been lost by 16 votes to 9 with 1 abstention.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. We now go on to the original paper, Councillor's original paper, and repeat the process. Mr. Russell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, councillors, again, to repeat, yep, we're voting on the budget proposals as detailed in your agenda pack. So, again, when I call out your name, please indicate whether you're for, against, or abstain. Councillor Ansell. You're on mute, Councillor Ansell.
Still abstain.
Councillor Bannister.
For.
Councillor Belsey.
Against.
Councillor Burton.
For.
Councillor Chowdhury.
For.
Thank you. Councillor DeCara.
Abstain.
Councillor Diplock.
For.
Councillor Dow.
For.
Councillor Freebody.
Abstain.
Councillor Holt.
For.
Councillor Lamb.
Abstain.
Councillor Maxted.
For.
Councillor Metcalfe.
Abstain.
Councillor Mear.
For.
Councillor Morris.
For.
Councillor Murdoch.
Abstain.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Rodahan.
For.
Councillor Shuttleworth.
For.
Councillor Smart.
Abstain.
Councillor Swansborough.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Tutt.
For.
Councillor Vaughan.
For.
Councillor Wallace.
Abstain.
Councillor Whippy.
For.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, the budget has passed by 16 votes to 1 with 9 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Thank you, everybody. Okay, that concludes agenda item 8A. We will now have a short 5-minute break, a comfort break, and I'll see you back here in 5 minutes, which is 1952. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you very much. We now continue with the agenda. Item 8B, the Local Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Councillor Shuttleworth to present, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that the council are recommended to adopt the 2021 Local Council Tax Reduction Scheme as the 21-22 scheme, in other words, continuation, and continue with the Exceptional Hardship Scheme. So I formally move that.
Thank you very much. Do you have a seconder?
Formally second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to make a contribution?
No.
I see no hands. And assuming there's no dissenters, I will be happy to approve item 8B.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 8C, approval of licensing fees. Councillor Rotherham, please present.
Can I ask the council to accept all the proposals that are in the minutes?
Thank you very much. Do you have a seconder, please?
Once again, formally second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Anybody wishing to speak? I see no hands. Can I get a nod of approval then, please?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'll move on to item agenda number 9. This is the motion to the full council. I shall ask Councillor Shuttleworth to initially present the motion before we go to the public speakers. Councillor Shuttleworth, would you like to present your motion, please? Sorry, Councillor Shuttleworth, you're on mute. Could you represent your motion? Thank you.
Sorry, you must have muted me. Do you want me to read out the terms of the motion before speaking, or I'm just thinking of those that are listening in?
Yes, absolutely. Just read out your motion, and then we'll go to public speakers, and then you can come back and speak to your motion. So just read your motion out now, please.
Thank you. So the motion is to do with the use of emergency accommodation in Eastbourne. And the motion is that Eastbourne Borough Council calls upon Brighton and Hove City Council to end their policy of placing large numbers of homeless people into emergency accommodation in Eastbourne over recent months. Apart from the detrimental effect on those people who are placed so far from their support services, the policy has impacted significantly upon local health, housing, police, adult social care, children's and other support services. Brighton and Hove City Council must find alternative accommodation in Brighton using the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government funding provided to the City Council for this purpose.
Thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. Do you have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor De Cara. We have 4 public speakers. I understand Sarah Lawrence is now going to read out the 4 statements. Sarah Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's Sarah Lawrence from Democratic Services. So, as you said, there were 4 statements and I'll read each in turn. So the first statement is from Christina Eubanks of the Eastbourne Chamber of Commerce. She says, "We have represented businesses in the Eastbourne area since 1892 and are the largest town chamber in the South East. We are also part of the Alliance of Chambers in East Sussex, representing 4,000 business members. Over the last 18 months, the situation on Eastbourne seafront has become untenable, and we've received countless complaints from members, staff and residents in what is one of the most disadvantaged wards of the country. Our members have worked hard to create a thriving community in Devonshire Ward, but this has all been undone by the placement here of people from Brighton and Hove with extremely complex needs. The aggression exhibited to our members is unprecedented and is impacting the business environment right across the town centre. This is made worse by placing vulnerable people here without forewarning to the police or the agencies that need to provide them with support. Drug dealing is constant and the police are stretched to the breaking point. Break-ins in the wider area have increased so much the government has been forced to fund the Secure Redoubt programme to introduce movement-sensitive security lighting and CCTV infrastructure to protect residents' homes. Please tell us, how do we prevent Brighton and Hove from sending more people to our town and get the current cohort returned to Brighton and Hove? How do we protect Eastbourne retailers and hospitality businesses who are threatened with closure? They are barely surviving the pandemic, and this antisocial behaviour is pushing many over the edge. In fact, hotels reported after lockdown 1 that guests checked out early and will not be returning to Eastbourne. How do we protect the safety of our members, their customers and Eastbourne residents? How do we train and support the bid team to manage an increase in antisocial behaviour caused by people with serious mental health and drug and alcohol issues? How do we protect staff, residents and businesses from the increase in serious organised crime operating supply into the town via HMO hotels? How do we encourage visitors to return to the town? We understand that government is funding the city is much greater than to the borough. So we do not understand why Brighton and Hove Council is exporting problem residents to a smaller town with a fraction of their funding. After lockdown, we want to reopen the town centre in a safe and positive way. Local businesses are investing $300,000 each year in the bid to create an attractive place, encouraging visitors back into the town. However, this initiative is being destroyed by the aggressive antisocial behaviour that is now rife across the town. Please do everything you can to get Brighton and Hove Council to use their own government funding to manage their own vulnerable residents. These are real people with real issues who need to remain near their support networks and not to be exiled to a new town without friends or support. Be under no illusion, the threat to Eastbourne posed by this antisocial behaviour, coupled by the pandemic and ensuring economic crisis, is greater than any other time since World War II. We cannot stress enough the damage this policy is doing to our residents, to the jobs and to the local economy. This is clearly unfair to the people removed from Brighton and is unacceptable to the business community in the area. So that's the first speech, Mr. Mayor. The second speech from your Eastbourne Business Improvement District, and that is from Luke Johnson. I write to you today to express the concerns of your Eastbourne bid, which represents 634 local and multinational businesses from all sectors, including retail, hospitality, leisure, professional and manufacturing within Eastbourne Town Centre, with regards to Brighton and Hove City Council policy of placing the homeless community out of the area in our town. Since last year, we have extensively lobbied and written to Brighton and Hove City Council alongside our partners in Eastbourne Borough Council and the Rough Sleepers Initiative to raise our concerns with the alarming influx in emergency accommodation placements that continue to be placed in Eastbourne. Many of our bid businesses are in close proximity to the number of buildings and hotels that they have chosen to use for emergency accommodation placements. Many of these buildings are not dedicated temporary accommodation sites for the purpose of supporting placements. Many of the individuals that Brighton Hove City Council place in Eastbourne have multi-complex needs that require a high level of resource to deal with. A resource which Brighton Hove does not supply, and unfortunately falls on the shoulders of the Rough Sleepers Initiative and local emergency services to provide instead. This is a completely unacceptable scenario, as our local resources are already stretched dealing with our own cohort of entrenched street community with multi-complex needs. As the Vice Chair of the Town Safety panel and a member of the Rush Sleeper Initiative group, I am hearing regular reports of disruption caused by these placements. This situation has unfortunately escalated to a stage where it causes a real risk to public safety and presents huge challenges to our businesses. As we are all aware, many of these individuals have a long history being involved in drug dealing, shoplifting and antisocial behaviour, which we unacceptably feel the full brunt of on a day-to-day basis in our town centre. Several of the individuals that have been placed in Eastbourne have in fact been banned from Brighton in the past for causing similar disruption and crime. This further shows the challenge that Brighton and Hove is placing on our doorstep. I am disappointed to report that since the replacement programme began, our lobbying has fallen on deaf ears. We have not yet received a response from Brighton and Hove on this matter, and the latest figures show that an additional 50 emergency accommodation placements were placed in Eastbourne from Brighton in January alone. On the back of this, we have furthermore seen a huge increase of shoplifting and ASB reports, many of which come from our businesses that have been targeted by these individuals at huge expense. At this stage, I would politely ask Eastbourne Borough Council councillors to support our lobbying on this matter with Brighton Hove and ultimately see a stop to this practice. I'm aware that Brighton Hove has received a large amount of government funding to support them with this matter, and they have plenty of available rooms in their own emergency accommodation sites to house their multi-complex needs individuals. Our business community fear that nothing is done about this. It will significantly impact the long-term reputation of our town and threaten our local economy as visitors choose to stay away. That's the end of statement 2. Bear with me. The third statement is submitted by Christian Hayter of the Eastbourne Hospitality Association, the EHA. The EHA represents over 130 hospitality businesses and around 95% of accommodation stock in Eastbourne. Eastbourne has a tourism-led economy which provides the foundation for many businesses in the town. Prior to the COVID pandemic, and according to official research, in 2019, tourism was worth 529.7 million to the local economy, with 846 tourism jobs directly supported, and overall 28% of the town's population was employed because of the tourism in Eastbourne. COVID has particularly hit hospitality hard and devastated the tourism industry, the effects of which are being felt across the town and the supply chain. As with many towns and cities, the third lockdown is pushing many businesses past breaking point, with what will be over 7 months of closure, sadly resulting in business casualties. Throughout the pandemic, the EHA has been keeping a broad picture of the effects on members. Below are some of the sobering statistics. That's them again. So initial loss of revenue from the first lockdown estimated at 38 million. Losses by the end of third lockdown estimated at 90 million. Loss of foreign independent traveller, which previously accounted for 45% of guest demographic and worth 77 million. Collapse of the traditional coaching market. Job losses of 30% of workforce in hotels and guest accommodation, and multiple business casualties, including a guest accommodation, restaurants, pubs, shops, and supplies to the industry. It is critical for Eastbourne to be positioned for immediate recovery when national restrictions allow. Businesses have invested greatly to make their premises COVID ready and provide customers with confidence to return. The majority of this investment has come from considerable lending that needs to be repaid and is the last chance of survival. We believe that the single biggest threat to the recovery of Eastbourne after COVID is the emergency accommodation placements being made by Brighton and Hove City Council. The number of placements and locations being procured are in prominent positions on the seafront, which is causing serious reputational issues to Eastbourne. The antisocial behaviour that comes from these placements, due to their complex needs, has meant that businesses and customers no longer feel safe in our town. This can be seen from the online reviews that visitors are posting during the pre-opening in summer of 2020. Since then, we understand that even more placements have been made and the problem is exacerbated. We would like to thank the agencies for their interventions so far, including Eastbourne Borough Council and the Police Service. However, now is the time for Brighton and Hove City Council to take responsibility and find alternative accommodation in Brighton. The EHA cannot stress enough that should Brighton and Hove City Council fail to take responsibility, it could cause permanent damage to Eastbourne's recovery. This damage will lead to further business casualties, empty hospitality buildings and job losses. Thank you for your time. And the final statement is from Heidi Lane, the proprietor of the Crown and Anchor. And and she speaks regarding the use of the Marine Hotel, which is next door to the Crown and Anchor. Over the last 10 years, I have built the Crown and Anchor into a thriving, successful, award-winning business. A family-friendly pub with an excellent location, excellent reputation and fantastic staff of around 30. One of the pub's attractions is its location opposite the seafront. The pub is surrounded by hotels and guest houses and relies on Eastbourne's tourist trade and private events held in the function room. Visitors could sit outside to enjoy the sun and people watch. The pub's licensed sitting area and car park is adjacent to the Marine Parade Hotel with just a narrow walkway separating the two businesses. We had built up a good relationship with the previous owners of the hotel, being considerate of each other's businesses. In fact, we both lived on site with our families. It was a lovely community. And then she talks about the current situation. I could talk about the issues arising from the hotel that is now housing people with complex alcohol and substance misuse issues. However, I feel that people listening to this statement will have extensive knowledge of how this would impact on the pub next door. What I would like to ask today from Brighton and Hove City Council and Eastbourne Borough Council is, how do I save my business? How do I protect the team, customers and residents of the Marine Parade Hotel? How do I save the 22 jobs that we have saved so far? How do I train and support my team to manage and approach our neighbours when they are begging from customers while ensuring their safety at all times and complying with strict COVID and licensing rules? How do I encourage these customers to return to the pub after such an experience, even if the team is so highly and extensively trained that they can manage the behaviour of people with extremely complex needs? How do I stop my business from being impacted by negative press associated with the hotel? I understand the difficulties and complexities of the residents of the hotel. As before the Crown and Anchor, I was a registered manager of an adolescent care home. Therefore, I recognise the importance of being able to manage that level of vulnerability and risk without negatively impacting on the local community. Please help me and my team to not feel scared and anxious and not to be overwhelmed with stress. We are already under extreme pressure due to the pandemic, trying to keep ourselves and our customers safe and survive the economic crisis. I am begging you to find suitable accommodation for our neighbours. If not, this will destroy our business. I hope to once again offer the function rooms to local groups, such as the Plastic Free Eastbourne, Greenpeace, Fair Trade, Roundtable and various charities, including homelessness charities, and to groups that attract the elderly. They need to feel safe when entering the building or sitting outside. They will not feel safe when they frequently witness drug dealing, fighting and antisocial behaviour and the overwhelming smell of marijuana coming from the open windows of the hotel. Can you honestly say that you would return with your family to this venue after witnessing these things? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's the completion of the 4 statements.
Thank you very much. And can I thank Christina Eubank, Luke Johnson, Christian Hayter and Heidi Lane for their contributions. And I also thank you, Sarah Lawrence, for reading them out, reading out those statements. OK, I'm going back now to Councillor Shuttleworth, who will now formally present his motion. Councillor Shuttleworth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to echo your thanks to Sarah there. I'd like to start by thanking Christina from the Chamber of Commerce, Luke Johnson from the BID, Chris Hayter from Eastbourne Hospitality and Heidi from the Crown and Anchor for presenting their very real concerns born out of the direct day-to-day experiences and the intolerable problems that they're now faced with as a result of Brighton City Council making over 200 placements of homeless people into emergency accommodation here in Eastbourne. It is truly shocking that Brighton Council have refused to recognise their duty to find accommodation in Brighton for people who they have a responsibility to assist. Brighton has been given £6.4 million to deal with their homeless placements and next steps accommodation. That's amongst the highest award outside of London. Eastbourne received an initial £330,000 as part of an award across the other East Sussex authorities. Brighton have been given the finance to manage the problem. The City of Brighton has the necessary accommodation. There is no excuse for a policy which sends people out of their home area, out of sight, out of mind. There is a human consequence of this derogation of duty. Many of the people who have been moved away from their local community and support networks have multiple and complex needs. Tragically, 11 people moved out of the area by Brighton have died, 3 in Eastbourne, 8 in Newhaven. Eastbourne Borough Council Housing and the local Rough Sleeper Initiative are doing a tremendous job housing more than 65 ex-rough sleepers from Eastbourne and providing ongoing support to this group with health specialists, including mental health support. And the Eastbourne housing team deal with around 70 new housing inquiries each week and do a tremendous amount of prevention work to keep people in their own homes. This does mean that we have a small number of additional people needing emergency accommodation, and currently we've got 126 households in that position. But the Brighton numbers have more than doubled those living in emergency accommodation in the town. The additional 200 plus of Brighton people are placing a huge additional pressure on local services. This has impacted on the existing homeless people and those in temporary accommodation in the town. It's impacted on our successful Eastbourne Rough Sleeper specialist services for people with multiple and complex needs. It's impacted on adult and children's services, as well as on the local voluntary groups who do a tremendous job in Eastbourne, helping so many people who are struggling. During January, when coronavirus infections in Eastbourne were at one of the highest levels in the whole country, instead of honouring promises to start to move people back to Brighton, Brighton City Council chose to make 51 additional placements in this town. This was outrageously risky at a time of such a high COVID infection rate and not acceptable. All councils occasionally need to place people out of area into, usually because they need specialist accommodation of some sort. That's normal practice in a handful of cases, in special circumstances, but not on a whole scale moving of masses of people away from their hometown. Mr. Mayor, the representations from the Chamber and from the BID and from the Hospitality Association and others have all spelt out the effect on local business and on residents, and indeed on the recovery in our town. Unfortunately, amongst those people, there is an element who've been moved into Eastbourne who have a history of antisocial behaviour and criminality and are well known to Brighton Police. These people must be returned to Brighton as a matter of urgency, where they're known to law enforcement agencies. There's an additional problem around vaccinations for people who are not registered with a local GP. And this also brings into our attention just how unwise it was for the clinical commissioners to close the walk-in centre at Eastbourne Station in such volatile times. Moving forward, Brighton City Council must listen to our representations and agree to start a programme of moving people back to the city. I'm in contact with the housing lead member in Brighton, and our senior officers are talking regularly to their counterparts in Brighton. We've had promises of action in the past. These need to be turned into real action. Brighton Council must do the right thing and develop their move-on plans and help get these people back reconnected with their community in Brighton. And I ask for the council to support the motion and work together and work in partnership with the various organisations in Eastbourne and indeed in conjunction with Brighton Council to get this matter resolved as a matter of urgency. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. I have 3 speakers. Councillor Tutt, followed by Councillor Belsey, followed by Councillor Freebody. Councillor Tutt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I begin by thanking the 4 individuals that took the trouble to write in. From their statements, people quite clearly understand the impact that these placements are having upon our town. We're sympathetic to the needs of the homeless. If you were to carry out a survey of individuals and ask about their personal hierarchy of needs. Once you've gone through food and drink, housing and having a roof over your head is right up there as a priority. And as a council, Eastbourne takes our responsibilities very seriously and has a very good track record of trying to find accommodation for those who are unfortunately find themselves living on the streets in our town. But we have not got the size of a town to import the challenges that others face, and Brighton and Hove is clearly top of that list. There's a protocol that says that if you're placing people into another council area, you should contact them. That didn't happen with Brighton and Hove. We learned about this from some of those who have written in when they found out, because the placements were in the vicinity of their businesses. And at that point, I took the opportunity to ring the leader of Brighton Hove City Council. I got an answer phone message. I left a message explaining the concerns that I had and asked him to call me. I'm still waiting for that call. Our officers took up the cudgels at that point and contacted our officers in Brighton and Hove, and they eventually got responses, and those responses said that we haven't got places, we haven't got available places in Brighton and Hove at the moment. We're seeking them, and we plan to move those people back. Far from that happening, as Councillor Shuttleworth has made clear, during the lockdown, during the COVID lockdown, they placed 51 more people here. That's unbelievable behaviour. And the statement that they can't find accommodation in their own city, our officers have found accommodation in Brighton and Hove, and we can show them exactly where that accommodation is. So it's a falsehood to suggest that they can't cope within their own boundaries. Yes, this has a major impact upon our local economy. It has an impact upon our policing services and our health services and our social care. But it's not actually helping the individuals either. What Brighton and Hove have done is neglect their responsibilities, the responsibilities that they've been given £6.5 million of government money to address. And they've moved those people, those vulnerable people, away from their friends and away from their social networks. So they're not actually helping those people, and they're not caring for them properly within those out-housed accommodation units. As Councillor Shuttleworth has again drawn our attention to the fact that there have been 11 deaths from people out-housed, 3 here in Eastbourne and 11 in New Haven, where those people have been in what is seen as temporary accommodation for even longer than the placements here in Eastbourne. Perhaps this is even more surprising when you realise that Brighton and Hove City Council is actually a green council, a green authority. And I took the opportunity to look at their manifesto and see what they say about homelessness. They actually have just one bullet on their manifesto. It says, help homeless more. Mr. Mayor, they're not doing that by their actions here, and they need to step up and take responsibility for the people that are vulnerable in their city and look after them within their own boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tutt. I have 4 speakers, Councillors Belsey, Freebody, Holt and Maxted in order. Councillor Belsey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd just also like to thank those that have taken the time to write in, and perhaps one day we'll be able to see them as they make their own speeches to the council. I feel sorry for those that have been placed here, obviously, because it's I guess a lot of them probably didn't want to be moved from where they were in the first place. And the argument that we've got is not with them, it's totally with Brighton and Hove City Council. I think Councillor Tutt and Councillor Shuttleworth have already said most of what is relevant. I'd just like to be quite short and say, as we now have a hopeful timeline to reach a full opening of Eastbourne, it's imperative that Brighton take these people back so that we can work to get our town back to normal and back to what people enjoy in our town, and encourage holidaymakers to come here for a vacation. The last thing we want is people going away again and saying it was dreadful. There were people on the streets, there was drunks here and whatever there, and it's just going to turn people away from us as a town. It's going to take a while to get back after COVID anyway. We all appreciate that. But the sooner we can get this sorted out, the better. And I just support this motion that, you know, we have to get Brighton to take some responsibility in what has happened. And it's just chucking responsibility aside at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Freebody, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this impacts some of the most vulnerable people in our society. Yes, it has a knock-on effect to businesses in the town, to resources stretched from the police to our council services, etc. But I think it's really important, has already been highlighted, of the human cost of this. Councillor Tutt earlier alluded to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you know, having a roof over your head as well as water and air and food is a basic need that we all need to survive. One of the things, so Councillor Diplock and myself have agreed, and the rest of the scrutiny committee, is to have a dedicated meeting for this, and the officers are trying to sort that out so that we can have a constructive dialogue. That's the idea, to have a constructive dialogue with people involved, with Brighton. If I hope that some representatives from Brighton will come over to the scrutiny meeting. I choose my language carefully. To say I'm disappointed with Brighton and Hove is an understatement. It's pretty scandalous, to be honest. We've already talked about support networks, and obviously in my day job, one of the things under Transforming Care agenda is to move people back from out of county placements to be nearer their loved ones and their support networks. And that's equally as important for someone living on the streets. We're living in really unprecedented times at the moment with the COVID pandemic. So imagine how fearful we've all been if you are living on the street or you've been placed out of your town city with the network of people that you know and trust, that you've built up bonds with, to be placed somewhere during unprecedented times, fearful times, and those fears on top of, as we've already said, mental health issues, you know, people who are ex-servicemen, a whole multitude of needs that we need to support people and address. It must be frightening, to be honest, and it's not sad, it's heartbreaking. And as we've already said before, Brighton and Hove City Council have received money like we have from central government. You know, there was a rough sleeper initiative. The government have spent money supporting people who are homeless, and that was one of the first things at the beginning of the pandemic as well. So as opposed to previous debates that we've had tonight, where as a council we don't always see eye to eye, and that's fine. On this, I believe, and I haven't heard everyone else speak yet, that we're a united council on this, but I would urge everyone, I know we've spoken about businesses and that effect, but please remember the human cost of this, which is pretty honestly, it's tragic. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Freebody. I have Councillor Holt, followed by Councillor Maxted, followed by Councillor Ansell. Councillor Holt, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And unsurprisingly, you'll find me in full agreement with everything that's been said so far tonight, and I'm incredibly grateful for people's submissions and that of the public. It feels a bit self-serving to say I'm grateful for the bid to write in, but I truly am, and for what it's worth, that was written by Luke in his role as vice chair of the town centre panel and not by anybody else. So it is truly felt by the business community who are contacting us. But Councillor Freebody raised something that's really important, and that is, this is also about the human aspect, and I think sometimes, dare I say, that can be lost. I was contacted by a resident who had been placed by Brighton and Hove, and he or they described a story of how it happened, and it wasn't. They're not criminals. It's not criminality in this sense. This is a person who, through COVID, has unfortunately lost their livelihood, and they've been having to present as temporarily accommodated. And he's told he has to then go 20 miles away to Eastbourne. He's taken away from his family. He's taken away from his children. What did he do? Mr. Mayor, I contacted Brighton and Hove with regards to this resident 4 weeks ago, and whilst I'm aware that Councillor Shuttleworth has received a response, I have yet to receive one. The bid, as has been alluded to, wrote to the Chief Executive of Brighton and Hove County Council, City Council 2 weeks ago, and we're still waiting a response. This isn't good enough. It's shocking. I'm really grateful for those letters and those submissions from the outside agencies. What I'd like to suggest, if I may, to that scrutiny panel that's looking into this is perhaps we could ask them to be part of that process and to give further details about what's happening to illuminate. I also want to say a very tribute, if you like, to Caroline for raising this as well at the highest levels at Prime Minister's questions. You know, I think Brighton thought we'd go away. I think that's what's so shocking about this. Back in October, as Councillor Tutt said, we wrote to them, and actually it was because residents had contacted me to say something's happening and there's a change of clientele. Have they notified Eastbourne Borough Council? We contacted Tim Whelan and his team, and they hadn't been informed. And then we were then able to backtrack. They failed their obligations. In their public press release, they then stated, yeah, it's minor cases, you know, it's not complex needs, and we'll do everything we can to rehouse them, and we've got a rehousing plan in place, and that's going to happen very shortly. And that was back in, I believe, October. And yet still in January, they continued their activities. So what they're saying publicly is frankly not correct. But actually, I don't know that because they haven't responded to me, or seemingly even Councillor Tutt's leader. Now, I just think, what on earth are they playing at? I wanted to mention that the bid has been really heavily involved in this and is lobbying and working with partners, and we want to work with everybody on this. It was our team as well who identified to the business crime group some of the known issues of a minority, I hope, but a minority of people within the town centre who were presenting themselves, because our team actually have work in Brighton as well. So they were recognising some of the individuals. But again, it wasn't Brighton and Hove. You know, Christina Eubank from the Chamber of Commerce, I think, sort of states it perfectly. They're kind of being exiled. I think this is awful. And it's not just awful because of the businesses, as has been alluded to. It's awful because these are human beings who are not being given the care or the attention or the compassion that Brighton and Hove City Council should be holding. In my letter or my email to the two lead councillors who, as I say, I haven't had a response to, I asked for details of their move on plan. I asked them to tell me, as a sort of a standing order for their own agenda, what the plans are and how they're progressing and how it's going. Nothing. Shocking, absolutely shocking. So thank you everybody for your contribution. I do think this is going to be passed unanimously, and I think that's really encouraging, because this is a big issue for our town, but actually it's a big issue for the people who are being affected, and it's deplorable. I appreciate Councillor Freebody sort of being very careful in what he's saying, and that's right, because he's the chair of scrutiny and he should be. And you know, we want Brighton and Hove to act proactively and engage with us on this, but frankly, I doubt that they will. And if that's the case, the light needs to be shined on them, and they can't just hide behind public statements which they then don't back up. It's outrageous.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Holt. I've got Councillor Maxted, followed by Councillor Ansell, followed by Lamb. Councillor Maxted, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Shuttleworth for submitting this motion, and thank everybody who has contributed this evening so far, and especially to people who've submitted statements to be read out to this meeting. I think it's irresponsible and dangerous of Brighton and Hove City Council to place vulnerable and very vulnerable people with complex needs into unregulated premises, irrespective of where they are. And I mean, I appreciate that the hotel trades in Eastbourne have had a seriously rough time, as an understatement to state that, but I know they have. But I don't feel that hotels or guest houses anywhere provide an appropriate and safe environment. And if placements such as this are to be made, then they should be to regulated premises where the health and safety of those placed there can be assured. I mean, it could be argued that the hotels should be required to register as a care home if they're accommodating vulnerable people with complex needs. Perhaps this could be referred to the Care Quality Commission for their input on this. At the moment, there's no assurance of any quality of care, accommodation, or people's needs being satisfied by where they're placed and by the people who are paid to accommodate them. And I would just point out, as probably everybody's aware, that houses of multiple occupation, HMOs, are prevented from opening up in tourist areas, and in effect, I mean, there is some similarity between this type of accommodation, and so I think the council really could possibly look at ways of not allowing this sort of accommodation to occur where it is, and maybe to impose some sort of regulation on it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maxted. Council, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, did you call me?
Yes, I did.
Clock's running. I'm very pleased to speak in support of the motion in the name of Councillor Shuttleworth. This is a matter of grave concern in several respects, eloquently outlined by our business leaders and the impact on the wider community there, but also equally on those vulnerable people who found themselves placed here at arm's length from Brighton, who can't possibly provide the level of support required to address people with very complex needs very often. And I would just like, for the record, to really reiterate, because I know some listening in will be concerned, there is no lack of commitment or compassion in our town to reach out and to support vulnerable people. But we believe those vulnerable people based in Brighton are best served in Brighton. Brighton that has city-sized services. Brighton where they have contacts and support systems. I'm afraid I need to share the same lack of engagement as Councillor Tutt and Councillor Holt have already outlined. And I think that is one of the things that we absolutely must urge for change going forward. I have raised this now twice in Parliament. On the first occasion when it became apparent that we were not being notified. And that strikes me as irresponsible on the part of Brighton and Hove City Council. And on a second occasion when it became clear the level of placements that Brighton was making that was causing such undue stress and concern here. I was in receipt of a letter from one of the bereaved parents from a Brighton transfer, and it made for heartbreaking reading. So I would like, in addition to the notification of our motion tonight going to Brighton and Hove, for us to add in a letter to them to go a little further than the motion, which is very sound policy, and ask them to immediately desist from making any further placements in light of how we find ourselves right here and now, and that they share plans for how they're going to bring Brighton homeless home to Brighton. Because there must be change. And that was very much the mantra when I met with the minister. There must be change for everyone's sake. But at this point, we need a change, yes, in policy, but we need for them to immediately desist from further placements. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ansell. I've got Councillor Lamb, followed by Councillor Dell. Councillor Lamb, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to endorse everything that I've heard from my colleagues and to thank Councillor Shuttleworth, whom I shadow in direct support services on this issue. I have to add to you that I'm very concerned about the cynicism of this, because the fact that these placements were made in secret without informing our officers or council, the fact that they were continued after many people and the council had formally complained about the appalling and inhuman treatment of these very fragile people, it still went on. And I'm very, very concerned about what's happening to their £6 million budget that they receive from central government to support these people. Are they placing people in New Haven and Eastbourne and Hastings to save money and to save money on supporting them, which would be a very, very inhuman and cynical way to behave? And I'm very, very concerned about this. The fact that there is no response to all the queries and communications that we've made to them is also very, very worrying. It sounds either that it's completely out of control there, or that there's some cynical way of secretly placing these people. And I have to say, you are deporting people from their homes. You are deporting the most fragile and vulnerable people in the community who need most support in a cynical way, and giving up your responsibility for them. And the great sadness of this is that 11 of these people have died, and they will not be the only ones. So it's enormously disturbing to think that a city council like Brighton and Hove would behave like this. And you can only hope it's incompetence rather than cynicism. And that's the point I would like to make. And I feel very strongly about this, having followed this all the way through. And when we're talking about 200 plus placements, we're not talking about 200 plus people, because a placement can be a unit, a family unit. So we're talking about a lot more people than that. We know about the impact on our town, which is absolutely destructive and appalling, but I'm concerned about the impact on those vulnerable and fragile human beings, and I would hate them to be the victims of cynicism within a council, but I'm beginning to suspect that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dell, followed by Councillor Rotherham, please. Councillor Dell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that people have said this evening. I thoroughly support the motion. I went to have a look at the Green Party policy, and I noticed in the homeless policy section, HO 705 starts every local authority shall work with partners, and HO 706 starts with homelessness rarely respects local government boundaries. And I'd say that's probably spot on here, and they should probably review their own policies. I think it's absolutely appalling. It's one thing for us to, when we're enveloped by someone like Wilden, who are building our borders, to have those conversations with them about the challenges that then brings in. It's a totally another thing to have to try and have a conversation with a neighbouring borough that are doing what they're doing and then not even responding. And I've heard for the last month or so, as this has been going on through offices, I know this isn't my portfolio, but the lack of contact, the lack of communication from Brighton and Hove just seems to be the most repugnant part of this. that these people who are the most vulnerable in our society are getting the least support from their home council, and being put in a place where people aren't expecting them or don't know that they're even there, or what needs they require or support they require. So it's just really to add my support to the motion. I think it's absolutely appalling, and I'm so pleased to see that whilst we may disagree on how money should be spent and how money should be earned, that on the basis of people, which is what we're here to do, is particularly to look after the most vulnerable, that actually we all agree 100%. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rotherham, followed by Councillor Bannister. Councillor Rotherham, please.
Thank you. I support the motion and endorse everything that's been said. We showed a lot of compassion in what's been said tonight. There's not much to add, except I would say to Brighton and Hove, take responsibility. Stop exporting your own residents. Provide your homes and your residents who have special needs with the care that they need. You have the funding, you have the accommodation. Be a good council, be a good neighbour, and do your duty.
Thank you. Councillor Bannister, followed by Councillor Whippy, please. Councillor Bannister.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've lived and worked in the town centre now for nearly 40 years. These problems we have had before, but Eastbourne is a welcoming place. We've always looked after people moving into the area and supported them, whether they come from abroad or from other towns. But unfortunately, in this instance, we haven't got the facilities to support them. We haven't been given the infrastructure. We haven't been informed they're coming, and we are lacking in our ability to help them. And this is terrible. We really need Brighton to step up to the mark, to take some responsibility for their residents they've moved over here. The perception that they are giving is that Eastbourne is not a safe place now. Eastbourne is a safe place. The police back this up on this, but with the numbers that are coming over, the visitors are just not feeling safe, and we cannot have this. It's not fair on our business. It's not fair on the people that are being moved over here. They will be feeling that they are being victimised by Eastbourne people, and we're not. We are just trying to support them and help them out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Whippy, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to support what my fellow councillors have been saying. I think it's important as well to point out that that Brighton, unlike us, is a unitary authority. As such, their duties cover those that we don't have as a borough council, such as health and well-being, adult social care, and benefits as well. And in considering what we're going to do about this, or apart from appealing to their better nature, which it appears to date that they don't actually have one, we could possibly go further if they don't listen. Under the Equality Act, the protected characteristics cover the most vulnerable, such as those with learning difficulties, disabilities, people that have gender reassignment. A lot of these people are possibly make up a huge percentage of the people that have actually been placed here out of those 200, which is possibly the reason why we are seeing so many deaths, because these adult social care, for example, all these services that they rely on in Brighton, they're not receiving in Eastbourne because they're not close enough. If they were, then we wouldn't have seen these deaths. I would actually say that if Brighton and Hove don't listen, then we should take things further, using the law. I mean, this placement is tantamount to direct discrimination under the Equality Act, and also a breach of their duty of care and negligence. A blanket policy like this could be the subject of a class action for judicial review, and I think we need to remember that the law is on our side here. If we can't appeal to their better nature, we should force their hand.
Thank you, Councillor Whippy. As I have no other speakers indicated, I'll call upon Councillor De Cara to second the motion. Councillor De Cara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wow, what powerful comments from those representations. I think you know, they summed it up perfectly. I'm very happy to second the motion, as I believe it's really important that this is seen as a cross-party initiative. Eastbourne Borough Council must present a united front to Brighton and Hove City Council. I do endorse the comments made by Councillor Ansell and others that Brighton and Hove should be called upon to stop sending new placements immediately, and that those here should be repatriated. I believe this is an imperative. These are, as many have rightly stated, extremely vulnerable people placed way outside of their support system. We need to be firm on this. Now is really not the time to pull our punches. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Before I go back to Councillor Shuttleworth to sum up, I'm just conscious that both Councillor Cara and Councillor Ansell have suggested, I wouldn't say amendments because there is no amendment, but a tweaking to the motion. So I'm thinking that following the word purpose, there should be a furthermore ... So, but that's up for discussion between Councillor Carr and Councillor Shuttleworth. Councillor Shuttleworth, I invite you to sum up, please.
Thank you. Perhaps if I start with that point, I mean, clearly the letter and the representations that we make to and the meetings that we have with Brighton, we will certainly be saying no more, and we will certainly be saying that we want to start as we have already passed those messages. I'm more than happy to incorporate that into the responses going forward. And my initial comment is to say that what we're seeing here is actually what Eastbourne does best, which is the whole Eastbourne team, and that's not just the people sitting in this meeting tonight, though it's great that we're united, but the various partnerships, and we've got very strong partnerships in Eastbourne, across the business community, across the voluntary sector, across the town as a whole, are all, I think, at one on this. And this is about, for me, it's an issue of humanity and respect. It's about the individual people who are caught up in all of this. And I think the message that's come across from everybody tonight is that Eastbourne is a welcoming town. And as a council, we do already do a tremendous amount with our own with the homeless community in Eastbourne, and as a council we've got a very good track record, but this is an extremely unusual position. What we've got effectively is the council along the coast who are not fulfilling their responsibility to their own homeless community, and you know, enough is enough. So firstly, I'd just like to, in summary, just say thank you again to those who sent in their representations. The points that Christina made about the impact it's having and about individual people were very, very well made, and I really appreciate that from the chamber. And again, the bid with Luke's comments and the issues about disruption for public safety and the impact on local businesses and the antisocial behaviour, points very well made. Eastbourne Hospitality Association obviously reminding us about the tremendous impact of COVID, and then on top of that having to cope with this additional problem which we shouldn't be having to deal with. And of course we're all very sympathetic, empathetic towards particular individual businesses like Heidi from the Crown of Anchor, again, who made her points really well. From the councillors, as Councillor David Tutt said at the beginning, we are very sympathetic to the needs of the homeless. We do have a good track record, and in this particular case, we want to see Brighton City Council to follow the correct protocols and procedures and to do the right thing. I agree with Councillor Belsey in his arguments as well. I mean, this has been a cross-party tonight. Councillor Freebody on the impact of the most vulnerable. And indeed, thank you for reminding me about the scrutiny committee. And I know, again, cross-party, looking to call Brighton to task on that and invite them to come across and answer questions, and obviously use that as another pressure point to get action. Councillor Holt talking about the involvement there. The fact that there's a lack of response from councillors and from officers in Brighton, which is absolutely unbelievable, deplorable. I am starting to get a response now, and I am getting a response that says that they are willing to sit down and have a meeting, councillor to councillor and officer to officer. The officers' meetings are taking place. We're looking to set up a meeting with councillors and officers, and indeed, as somebody mentioned tonight, in going forward, try to involve those business groups that have contributed to this, so that their position can be made clear at those meetings. Others that spoke, I agree with Councillor Maxted saying how irresponsible Brighton have been on this, and talking about the way we can look at these particular hotels. Well, I can say to him that we are looking at that. Our difficult properties team are looking at these hotels and looking at the designations, so that is an avenue that we are following up. I'd like to thank Councillor Ansell in her role as Member of Parliament for keeping a high profile on this subject in Parliament, and indeed would welcome her involvement continuing with the Council in whatever representations we can make. And I certainly agree with her about we don't want any further placements. Yes, Councillor Lamb, one could well say that Brighton's approach to this has been cynical, and that they haven't acted in a manner in which is appropriate for a local authority. Councillor Dow has called into question the Green Party's policy. I'll let that one go, but it is extraordinary that they are behaving in the way they are. Yeah, Councillor Rodan, I think, summed it up for me. Message to Brighton: take this responsibility, do your duty. Absolutely. Councillor Bannister, again, reiterating the fact Brighton have been funded to do this, to look after their own people. Eastbourne is a welcoming town. Absolutely. And Councillor Whippy at the end, yes, we have looked and we are looking at the legal route. We haven't ruled that out. If it comes to it, then we will take a view on how we can put pressure that way as well. I think for me, the debate has, as I say, has shown all the things that are good about Eastbourne Borough Council. On this issue, we come together, we work together, and we've got a united front. And along with the community in Eastbourne, we've got right on our side. This is an issue where the right thing to do is for those people who've been displaced away from their own community. As Steve Holt said, I also was involved with the individual who, through no fault of his own, his business had gone, his home had gone. He finds himself displaced and placed in Eastbourne, and his children are in Brighton. And in a lockdown situation, that's not a nice place to be. There's a human story behind this, and it is, as I say, an issue of humanity and respect. And it's about time that was addressed. So thank you for everybody's comments, and I'm hopeful that we can have a unanimous vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth, and thank you very much to everybody who's made a contribution to this motion. I detect no dissent, so I'm going to take it that this motion has been passed unanimously by Eastbourne Borough Council.
Agreed.
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 Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We now move on to item 10, and this is to note the proposed calendar of meetings for 2021-2022. This is purely to note the calendar of meetings as we formally ratified at annual council on 19th of May. However, does anybody wish to speak? Yes, I have Councillor Smart first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I did allude to this when I was talking about the budget. Clearly, whatever view you take in terms of financial position, clearly the report from the external assurance review is going to be critical, and that review is going to turn up towards the end of May. Actually, I think the letter from the government says that it's to be completed by the end of May 2021 unless a later date for completion is advised by the department. So clearly that information will not be available by the time we meet full council in May. The next full council is November, and I think that is rather too long. And therefore, what I would like to propose and ask, perhaps, perhaps we could even take a vote on this. I know you say it's a note, but we could ask the officers to look at arranging an extraordinary full council meeting in September. May to November is a four-month gap. September is conveniently placed halfway between. We should be in a position of understanding these rather large unknowns in terms of the financial situation. So I wonder, perhaps, Mr. Mayor, if we could actually take a vote on that for the officers to investigate a date for an extraordinary full council meeting in September.
Thank you. There's a full council meeting scheduled for the 21st of July, so I'll just put it in there. Councillor Belsey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was actually going to query. I was looking back over the years, and we used to have 5 council meetings a year, and now we've come down to 4. I don't recall it being changed, but it presumably was and went through council. But there used to be one in September when I checked back. I just wonder where it's gone to, and if the officers are going to look into the possibility, we may need a special meeting, as Councillor Smart has already said, because the details might not be through for the July meeting. So we may need a special meeting. So perhaps the officers could look into that, and perhaps it hasn't got to go to all council. I'd like to know, perhaps I can have a written response as to why the September meeting has disappeared off the calendar over the years.
Thank you. Councillor Tutt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Colin obviously missed that. It was, I believe, agreed cross-party some time ago to remove the September meeting. There is, of course, the July meeting in the diary, but as I said to Councillor Smart earlier today when he said he wanted to speak on this, that if he has concerns about the meetings calendar, it will be approved ultimately in May, and I'd be very happy to discuss it with him in the meantime so we can agree things cross-party. Doesn't need a vote tonight. That will come to annual council in May.
Thank you. Councillor Freebody, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just Councillor Tutt, when you spoke there about working something out for May, obviously where Councillor Smart's talked about a possible September meeting, could we also look at timings? Because the last cabinet meeting, which was a couple of weeks ago, isn't debate. There's no recourse for us to call that in for this council meeting because of the time. There's only a couple of weeks between the cabinet meeting and scrutiny meetings and full council meeting. Now, normally this is okay. This is, it's not a problem. We can wait a few months. But when we take decisions, or say when the cabinet takes decisions such as the waste contracts, so moving from weekly to fortnightly collections, by the time we get to debate it at council, if we want to call that in, it's May and the contract's already started. So we're starting in April. So we'll be debating something that's sort of happened months ago. And, because I think we did debate some of this at scrutiny. I think the council's missed a trick on food waste, etc. But this is not what this part of the meeting's about. But yeah, I just think if there's cabinet meetings before the February council meeting, where obviously there's a lot on the agenda because it's the budget setting as we've already had this evening, but it would be handy to perhaps debate those issues before they take effect, because the one in May is too late. So, in the balance of scrutiny and openness, etc., that would be quite handy if the cabinet meeting and the full council meeting were sufficient time apart that officers can sort the minutes out and agree those, and that can be debated at full council meeting. I noticed the budget bit that's already been debated, but the rest of the cabinet meeting minutes and the scrutiny meeting minutes can't now be debated until May. So I would also ask that that's looked into too, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Freebody. Can I make a request that Councillor Tutt, Councillor Smart and our officers discuss this outside the meeting? And hopefully you can come to some sort of arrangement regarding the calendar moving forward, that we can debate this at annual council. So can I make that request, please, that Councillor Tutt, Councillor Smart and our officers discuss the calendar meetings for 2021-22 outside this meeting, and hopefully there'll be a amicable resolution. Thank you very much for that. I now move to item 11, special urgency decision by cabinet members. Councillor Tutt, please.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. And do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, as long as it's not going to be disclosing any interest, but I don't get any money for it, so I'm sure it's fine.
Okay. Mr. Russell, you've got your hand up. Do you wish to make a contribution?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to clarify for members that this is doesn't require a formal proposer and seconder. This is purely for noting in accordance with our constitution.
Thank you very much. Thank you, duly noted. Okay, and item 12 is discussions of minutes of council bodies. There were none, so nothing to call there. So the date of the next meeting is on the 19th of May 2021, and I formally end the meeting at 21:05. I say thank you very much to everybody for your contributions this evening, and good night.